Hello. Just your friendly neighbourhood Salmon Insight talk show here. Nothing big to talk about this week or anything. Just a friendly little chat with friends about, knitting, cats, things that we've seen in trees on the week. How you doing, Monty? Life good? Life good?
Yeah, it's good. I'm especially looking forward to our in-depth discussion of brown paper packages tied up with strings.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's one way to think of Europe. It's like a old-fashioned, kind of like a old world, refined, a lot of subtleties to it, Monty. It's not very in your. It's not American, okay? It's not garish. It's not in your face. It's not loud colors. It's kind of like it's all in the details. It's Proust.
It's stately, refined.
So listen, anyone who watches this show and is operating under the the illusion that this is a show about drama or about attacking people or about gloating when you're right about things, bringing up people's past failures, you're wrong. This show is just about talking and analysing very in-depth stuff about European LCS games, why they're great, why they last so long, why they're all those awesome lane swaps, why they pick those champions. Those are the kind of things I like to get to know. No, actually, but we will, just to preface this, we will talk about NA stuff and if any teams have changed players or what that might mean, but that will be later in the show. For now, we will talk about Europe. And so my guest here, some people would think of him as the second choice for the NIP roster. Other people would think of him as the second choice for the Alliance roster. I think of him as Tabzz, very good player, played on Lemon Dogs, good attitude, in-depth kind of guy. How's it going, Tabzz?
Oh yeah, pretty good. Having a good time in the EU LCS. Having a lot of fun.
No, well, let's start there actually, because here's the problem. Okay, if I'd have known the future, okay, I could have scheduled this show about 2 weeks ago, and the way I would have built the show then is like, listen, there's a team in EU LCS who is going for the record for the most wins of all time. I was tracking the stats, okay. You were at 12-2. That was the best start in history. You were tied with Curse from the first split in NA. You were tied with even the Cloud9 lineups, those ones that just dominated and only lost 3 games or 4 games. And I was thinking, wow, Alliance has got it all together. That thing in the playoffs, that was nothing. That was just a momentary blip. This is the real Alliance. They're going to dominate Europe. They're going to dominate the world. And then you started handing out free wins. It's like Fnatic last season. You were like, you get a win, you get a win, you get a win, you get a win. And you gave everyone in EU LCS confidence, and now they're all bit fucking behind you, and Fnatic's like 1 game behind you, Tabzz. What's going on?
Well, they had to make it competitive, right? It's like, otherwise they were just going to run away. It wouldn't have been good for the fans. So
yeah, gotta keep it exciting, of course.
That's right. It's just, it's the, it's...
gotta give everyone some hope.
Yeah, Alliance is the Roman Empire. They're really dominant. They're just going to crush you, but they still offer you bread and circuses anyway, right? They're nice to the people.
Yeah, well, for the real answer though, back when we started losing, it was just like the game changed a lot back then, and I don't know, the first game we lost I think it was against Wolves when they did this level 1, and we just got fucked over by it, and then they just won the game basically only off a level 1, and kinda all tilted from that game, so the mood was really shit for the rest of the day. So we lost the second game as well that weekend, but yeah. I don't know, basically the game just changed a lot, actually, the split already. I would say it's probably changed more than any other split before. And we had a pretty tough time finding out, okay, what's the best now? How are we supposed to play the game now? It's changed so much, and it's everything got nerfed and changed around. So we started losing some games to pretty much everyone, because it was the game was basically up to grab for everyone who was figuring out what's good first. And that's why some teams started losing, some teams started winning. You see us and SK, we were doing super good, and we were far above everyone else in the rotational gameplay and the objective gameplay, and then suddenly, okay, the game changes, and you see rotations are not that useful anymore. I mean, objective-based gameplay is simply not as strong as it was before. it's even better to just go for kills and pick off comps, and that's what like say teams like Fnatic are really good at. So we see them like just shooting up the standings because they were really bad at rotational gameplay, like objective-based gameplay, and they're really good at pickoffs. So you see, suddenly you see them just rise a lot, and you see teams like SK and us, we lose so many games.
Okay, Monty, react to this. We've just heard that apparently rotational play is not that big anymore. You know, it's about pickoffs now. The Fnatic style is the way to play the game, Monty, if you really want to know from an analyst. So what's your response to this?
I actually think that it's more to do with the increased number of 2v2s and 1v1s. And I suppose you can tie that into saying rotational gameplay in that in the early game, it's less about the lane swap tactics and like taking objectives. And also, I think it's been more we've kind of found out what's good and how to create these timings now with the dragon and the lane swap and everything. So it's more of a like a branching path. If this happens, then we do this. If this happens, then you do this. And I think most teams have a better grasp on that situation, so that we've kind of come back around into having the 1v1s and the 2v2s, and having that, because of the increased dragon gold and everything like that, having that be more dominant again. So I could see, that's how I would define that's how I understand what you're saying, Tabzz.
Yeah, but First Blood is like worth a ton of gold now as well. It's like 400 gold
75%
plus 200
now
on assist, so it's like if you get First Blood, it's basically almost like getting a dragon. Like, it's so much gold, so you can even trick teams into thinking you're doing dragon or just kill them. If you get even one kill, if you get the First Blood, like, it's worth so much. So having characters that are strong in like early skirmishes, good at pickoffs, is like really important.
Yeah.
So people always used to say that Fnatic actually was one of the teams who never did the role swap. Lane swap. I mean, you think about it, Fnatic, Soaz always wants the 1v1. Expectate would always just play 1v1 versus everyone. They have a really strong bot lane. What is the impact of lane swaps now, Tab?
You mean in Fnatic's gameplay?
Just in Europe in general, in terms of as you would like sticking on the topic of like this general trend you were describing of like what you think's changed and why it's put some teams up and some down. Where do you think lane swaps are at right now?
I don't think lane swaps are as prominent anymore. Like, you don't see like Twitch being picked often anymore as well. Like, it just doesn't happen that often anymore because dragon is just worth so much. It's better. You're better off just picking really strong bot lane heroes, and like Braum is in the game now, so you can pick like really strong bot lane heroes and just try to win from bot lane. Just get an all-in going. Like, you see actually in bot lane right now, I think there's like a lot of all-in lanes being played again, especially because Braum is in the game now. So kind of seeing back to that old Springs playstyle where you have like any support that just like kills you, and just going into a pick off into a dragon.
So Monty knows all about bot lanes that just want to trade all the time and go all in and kill you. So Monty, where do you see bot lanes in line of what Tabzz is saying here? Is this how you've seen the trend?
Yes and no. I do think that Jinx is coming back more into competitive play because of that all-in aspect, so that we can see a lot more Jinx these days. I think that probably Nami is more than likely going to drop off a little bit as a result of what he's saying. But I mean, champions like Thresh and Braum and to an extent too Morgana are still going to be quite powerful. I'm also sorry about the noise, guys. There's actually construction going on in my apartment building. There's literally nothing I can do about it, so I'll be
We can actually hear your mic the same way, so don't worry. Like when you're talking, we can still hear you fine. It's just it's in the background.
Yeah. So I'll be muting my mic like when I'm not talking, but I apologize about that.
Okay, was that it?
I mean, I think it's an interesting change, and like you're saying, the First Blood gold going to 75, back up to 75% early on, and then ramping very quickly into the full 400, is making that change much more applicable. So yeah, I think that we'll probably see more of a shift into these all-in duo lanes. It does make things a little, I suppose, even more snowbally just off of one kill, though. I'm not sure that I really like this change. I think that the lane swap meta, when you're at about 50% with that at the current time, is kind of ideal, because I think it's a lot less. I dislike the value being placed on the early game at the moment.
So Tabzz, if we continue the trend here of just talking about AD carry for a second, if we think of the strongest mechanical AD carries in Europe, we'd have Tabzz, we'd have Reckless, we'd have Mr. Alice, we'd have Creaton. These are actually the teams now who are at the top or who have been rising the weeks, etc. Meanwhile, SK, okay, Candy Pan is a good player, but he's not necessarily in the same category as those players when you talk about that role of it. Has this change that you're talking about with the laning actually affected those players in that way, do you think? What's your take?
Do you mean like the past 2 weeks specifically, or like this whole split so far?
You told me what's an interesting way to go with it.
Well, I would say that okay. So in the start of this.
Oh, your mic just went off.
Is it better? Hello?
Yeah, it's back on again. Okay. Maybe you just
Okay.
hit a wire or something. Yeah, go on.
Oh,
Start
yeah.
again.
Okay, so I think earlier this season when you had like the really OP BT and like Lucian, I think having a really strong mechanical AD player at that time that didn't mind going aggressive was really strong because you had top laners like Lulu and Kayle and you had very good supportive heroes. So you could easily jump into the fray and get an ultimate and you could easily pick people off without being afraid. Like playing aggressive as an AD was really strong because you had like just a ton of lifesteal and just a supportive solo lane here generally to back you up as well. So that's why I did very well, especially earlier in the split. Like Froggen was just playing Lulu all the time and Wicked was just playing Kayle. I was Lucian. I would just jump in the fray and kill everyone because they couldn't kill me and it was really fun. But yeah, mechanical players, I would say right now it's less important. Well, playing aggressive is not that strong anymore as an AD carry. You're better off playing a bit more of a reckless style right now, I feel, where you just try to hit whatever's closest and just survive no matter what. That way you're, because you have less lifesteal in general, because all the lifesteal pretty much got nerfed. So you don't, and Lulu and Kayle are pretty much nerfed out of, well, not nerfed out of the game, but you see them a lot less. They're a lot less prominent, so you have a lot less support if you do jump in. But for the rest, I don't think much changed for the bot lane when it comes to mechanical players.
When you described there, like you started this answer off because I asked you about like Alliance's run. When you actually had the run of the 12-2, did you yourselves really think like, wow, we might go for one of those historic seasons where you win like 20 games, 22 wins? I mean, it's not like it was unprecedented. You finished the last regular portion of the last split in a similar fashion. You won like 10 out of 12 or something. So did it seem like, oh, this is just how our team should be working, you know?
Well, we didn't really know it. Like, actually, in the start of the split, I wasn't even really sure what to expect. Like, it was going pretty well, but like we weren't really doing too well last split. We were pretty shaky most of the time. So when we started just winning everything, like we were really confident in our drafts and our play, and we were just the best at doing those kind of drafts and playing in that certain way. So we just won pretty much every game. It was really hard for teams to play against us. But even in our later on wins, we actually looked pretty shaky, and you could see that we were making quite a lot of mistakes, but it was just not enough for the enemy to actually win off of, because we were still really good players and we knew how to bring back the game, but we're still making a lot of mistakes, and like we actually started losing. Like those mistakes started showing even more. And yeah, I don't think like it's really hard, I think, in League of Legends for like one team to stay at the top if the game is constantly changing, because okay, some teams have players that are really good at this style of playing the game and drafts.
What did you think, Monty, when you first saw Alliance when they were like dominating this split? I know you thought they were like the best team, and when they had like key wins like the game against Fnatic, it was a really good game. It sounds like you were actually kind of like buying the hype, like, okay, this is potentially going to be like one of the best teams in the whole world and they're going to dominate their region. Like, how do you see it then, and how's it changed?
I guess I was really impressed by the way that Alliance, especially early on in this split, decided to control vision and buffs and get 3 buffs at level 1 and then snowball that very efficiently into a win. In their more recent games, I mean, like, during the losing streak a couple of weeks ago, I did see some more questionable calls in terms of the lane swapping, so I feel like Alliance, you guys have kind of dropped off in terms of your ability to do that as well. Particularly the Millennium game, there were a few mistakes that were made with Wicked, because you guys actually got yourselves a nice early advantage, and I really didn't like the way that Millennium was playing that, but you didn't punish them for the way they played, and so Kevin was kind of able to like sit under tower and get a lot of CS instead of you like pushing him off the turret or breaking the freeze that Kraton was making. But early on in that game, when you guys like stalled out their attempt at Dragon and everything, it was great, you know. But then it just didn't kind of like it didn't follow through enough for me. So I guess I've seen some slippage in the lane swapping strategy and ability to make it work as well. And then, yeah, I would say the fact that some people in Europe particularly are playing more all-in and more assassin right now. You guys don't seem to have the best vision to combat that, especially flanks coming from the sides. I think you guys lose a lot of team flanks because you don't or team fights because you don't have vision on your flanks. And that can bite you as well. But just looking at Alliance's current play, and now that we've been through the last week where the wins have started coming again. Granted, they weren't against the teams that are kind of on the rise right now. If we talk about like Fnatic and Rocket and these teams that are looking better and better, but that said, I do think that there are some very minor improvements that Alliance can make to get back on top.
Okay, there was a lot of stuff there, Tabzz. Do you have any stuff you immediately want to respond to? I mean, Monty broke it down. Listen, he had his reasons, he gave his analysis there. But I get this. This is where I feel like we're in like I'm kind of bridging a philosophical chasm here, where in general the people from NA seem to think there's something a bit weird about how Europe plays here. So do you have some kind of reasoning as to why these things happen? Like why Wicked was playing that way against Kevin, why you played that way against Creaton, that in general?
Well, in that Millennium game in specific, I think we screwed up the freeze because they initiated we were too late at top lane to get the level 1 freeze, so we tried to push him in, but we messed it up, so he got like a ton of experience. And after that, Wicked had like a lot of troubles laning against him. That's true. I don't know if that's truly Wicked's fault. It could also be just our strategy's fault that we allowed him to get so much experience and gold at top. Instead of like doing a proper freeze at level 1, like maybe I was too late into the lane and that's why I couldn't get the right freeze off and stuff like that. It's like really little mistakes like that that can actually snowball the game really hard, because if the enemy top laner gets like 2 levels over yours, then it's like you can say bye bye to that 1v1, like you will have no map pressure on your teleport either. It's really easy to lose with a lot of map pressure really fast. Just by a little small mistake like that. Like same against in our Wolves game, like at level 1 we messed up, okay? Like they 3-buffed us and we didn't respond properly level 1. We could have invaded their red buff and just stopped them there, and then it would be a 2-buff start, which would have been actually completely fine, and we would have been able to respond properly after that. Like both those games just lost in like similar manners, just small mistakes that happen, and it can really easily just turn a game. And that's what I also meant, like, yeah, we are actually playing more sloppy than we used to in the start of the season. Or it's, I don't know if we are playing more sloppy, or it's just that those mistakes are being punished more, like, harder by the current meta or by the enemy teams. It could be both.
We usually, whenever Monty is talking about CLG, or he in general about NA, and he's talking about strategical things, like, you know, this is how you close a game out or you play it, I usually like jibe him, but with a genuine point behind it, which is like, okay, it's all well and good to know how something should be done, but to actually do it in the game is the hard thing. Like that's actually essentially the whole business of coaching. It isn't even just the things you do before, it's getting the player to know why he's going to do it in the game, you know. Because if the player just remembers what you say, that's one thing. If the player understands the principle though and can put it into action, that's the thing, right? So did you have something to say, Monty?
Oh, no, I totally agree with you 100%. And that's, like, I think that is the big difference, is it's easy to know it in theory. It's hard to, in the heat of the game, identify the situation properly and then also implement it. Of course, that's the real challenge. And yeah, it is a coach's job to help implement systems that enable the right decision to be made. So, I mean, you don't have to jibe. Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
I mean, I just use the CLG example all the time because obviously I know you can tell me what they should have done in the game, but if they don't do it in the game, there's a disconnect there, okay? So the reason I bring that point up is because obviously a good topic to talk with Tabzz about is the analysis aspect, because early on in the season, we had a young man called Loco on this show many moons ago, and he you know, made no bones about the fact he was working with Alliance. He also like took credit for hypothetically making you win Worlds with 2 roster moves in a alternate universe in which he joins Alliance. But anyway, early on, he was helping you through that initial run. Now, what's weird is, at the beginning, it sounds like, okay, that was helping in some way. Then when he announced that he wasn't joining, or you said didn't pick him up, or whatever the situation was there, it felt like the Alliance guys, when I saw the vlogs, tried to like downplay it a bit. Like, he helped us for a couple of games, you know, he gave us some tips and pointers here. How much was Loco actually involved initially in that Alliance run?
I think he was helping a lot, actually. Like, when we first got him...
He said he helped for the 2 games of Super Week, just to clarify. He said he didn't help plan the other games. And you have this other analyst, too, Leviathan, so we can talk about him a little bit as well. So anyway, continue. Sorry.
So first off, with Loco, right? So I think he helped us for about a week, and then started basically coming on and off, because I think he was trying out for TSM and other teams as well. But yeah, in the start he helped us a lot. He identified issues in our gameplay, and like he he brought it up with everyone individually, so he would drag people into TeamSpeak and like talk with them about how their issues, how they could play better, and like what they should do. And as a player, as a coach, he knew a lot about the Korean scene too. So he would bring over the drafts from Korea. He would watch that and then say like, "Oh, you guys could do this. Like, this is really showing. Like, Wicked, you stop playing Aurelia, and right now you start grinding Shyvana and that solo queue, and then
Really?
we're gonna win games." Yeah, that's how.
Yeah, that was his actual approach.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what he said.
what was the initial reaction like? What was the look on Wicked's face when he said that?
He was like, okay, because everyone respected Loco.
he said,
like,
he
nobody
said,
wanted to say
okay.
no.
And then he put on his
like-
grim face, and a single tear rolled down his cheek.
Yeah, I think Loco was like in game, was like checking, you know, he was hovering over Wicked, like looking at the solo queue
Okay.
match history, looking at what he's playing. If it was Aurelia, you know, he knew, could expect like the whip for when Loco would come eventually. But yeah, he did manage to get those issues out of team, because it was an issue. Like, Wicked was pretty stubborn. It's like, just give me Aurelia. Like, just give me Aurelia. Like, she's really good. And I was like, no, Shyvana is really good. You're going to play.
Was this
Shyvana.
actually how it was though? Was it like a debate? Okay, because that's the thing with Wicked.
No,
when you say something to Wicked, he's not just going to say okay. He's going to be like, well, you know, man, I think that maybe that I know what you mean, but like I have my own ideas, and if you just play it out, then could go right. Like. If I got that first kill, then I probably would have snowballed, win the lane anyway. Like, you know, I think I know what I'm going to do with this. Like, was it really like back and forth? Was he really just like, oh, okay, you're the coach, you told me what to do, it's my job, I do it?
Nah, he wasn't really that obtuse. It was more like, I was alright. Like, he was, in the start, he was like, yeah, but Aurelia is still good, I believe. But in the end, we did decide as a team, like, a coach is only good if you're going to listen to him and give him the opportunity to do it. Like, might as well see if his advice works out or not. And yeah, he ended up just accepting his fate pretty much.
So in terms of the team in general, okay, you said there, you gave a good example, the prime example that we'd all ask about, okay, which is Wicked, because he's very famous for specific champions he wants to play and a style of play that he wants to engage. But there's another fellow on your team, also hails from Denmark, also known to be just a tad stubborn, has his own ideas on champions that could win matchups, play in a certain way. Was Froggen also just totally open to the coaching? Was he involved in bringing Loco on? Like, how did this whole thing work out? Because everyone has the impression still that deep down it's Froggen's team. Everyone still thinks that, Tabzz.
Yeah, well, I don't think he has very much to say about Froggen, actually. He mostly approved of whatever he did and didn't really have much to say about his play, as far as I can remember.
Okay, so when Loco came in, he helped you initially here. Was the Leviathan guy already in place there as well? Did he come afterwards? What was the gap? Was it immediate? Was there weeks? What was it like in that?
No, actually, they were working together at the same time. We had Leviathan for a while before Loco came on, and then they kind of started working together. And, well, it was mainly Loco doing his coaching, and then it was Leviathan also chiming in sometimes and stuff. But the main coaching aspect was really up to Loco at that point, because he was also like the figure we respected a lot. And Leviathan was also kind of new to our team. We didn't really know much of him. He was mainly doing like replay analysis for us and like creating clips, and like we would watch together and figure out our mistakes. And it worked really well. Like, I think we improved a lot as a team. Everyone's issues got tackled. So for Wicked it was Aurelia is like, no, he just play Shyvana, and then for Shug it was talk more, because he used to be very untalkative. So Loco would say to him, oh, you really have to talk more, because being a good jungler is also about being very communicative and what your ideas for the game and for the team. And I think it was pretty much similar for Niv, because Niv doesn't really talk much either. And he basically gave the same advice to him, and just made sure that everyone involved actually improved. And as a result of that, I think people respected Loco Doco a lot, so they actually valued trying to train harder while he was watching. So everyone was like doing his best. So I guess it's like kind of like a psychological effect a coach can have. Like, you want to improve and you want to show the coach how good you are, and like you can train for him. And everyone actually, like, we had been trying to solve those issues already the past split, but we were pretty unsuccessful. And once like a sixth person came in, and like an authority figure, and we all just wanted to do our best and improve, and yeah, we actually ended up improving a lot.
So Monty, I set up the caveat that, okay, if we talk about coaching and if a team's implementing the coaching, if they're doing it right, we're not acting like CLG is the poster boy for how a team should implement the coach's strategy in every game and they always do it right, because that's clearly not the case. But that also means that Monty should be sympathetic to the idea that, okay, it's possible there could be ideas, or we actually had a really good plan, but some reason it didn't come out in the game. When you watch Alliance, do you have any sense for where they are, where the coaching is being implemented? Have you seen any areas that you're like, okay, that seems like something's going on there? Because when I think of their team, I don't think of them as like a really cerebral team in game. Okay, they seem a bit more to me, a bit reactive, or they just, there's a more of an individual component, even if they then at some level do connect. Like, what do you think on this topic? How would you have characterized them and maybe how they've implemented coaching?
I mean, from what I see when I watch Alliance play, is I think that the coaching has really helped in terms of their timings, particularly in lane swaps, and when they should do certain things and when they should contest objectives in a lane swap. I also see, as you're saying, that the pick and ban phase has improved substantially since you guys got a coach on board. I do think that there are certain things in lane swaps that were there that kind of aren't there anymore. And that's like, I think the biggest thing that I see for you guys is you aren't the best at identifying when you have a big advantage with your team composition in a power spike and when you should really push really hard. You tend to wait for somebody to make a mistake into you instead of realizing, hey, we've got this big advantage right now, let's press it hard.
Tabzz, what do you think? I mean, listen, when everyone has that... Part of the reason why I say people think of Alliance as Froggen's team is because whether or not he's like the boss and he tells everyone, that might be here or there. But just he's obviously the star and his style of play clearly affects the team. Well, when Monty's describing this, that's actually how you think of Froggen's style of play. It's the style of play of like, I get in position and I wait for the other guy to make a little mistake, or I try and just build a tiny little situation that I can get at. You don't really have like, oh, now it's time. Froggen isn't like now it's time to go all in on the guy and just snowball it, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree that we are not like the team that tries to push our advantage very hard. We just take it slow. We just take the map. If we're ahead, we just keep taking dragons, keep getting more ahead, and keep trying to control the vision all the time. And we're not the kind of team that would basically just initiate a dive or do a risky baron. Usually, just try to just win it slow. And once we know that we got a game in the bag, there's no reason to really try and push it super hard. At sometimes, if Froggen like knows that, like, okay, if we just do it like this, we win 100% anyway. So why would we take any risk?
Monty, that's like literally what Froggen has even said on this show. You remember that discussion he had where he was like, well, you know, if I could just like use up all my spells and abilities and I could just get like 2 CS extra, then I'd do that, you know. He made it sound like, you know, why would I ever go for a kill? Like, a kill, CS is worth more than a kill if you get all the CS, right? You never give up a death. Like, you don't agree with that, Monty. If you have the advantage, you close the game, right?
And I think we see a lot of instances of this being an issue because of the fact that, like, we see games where you guys go to 50 minutes and you have an edge, and then because of long death timers, you make a single mistake. It is a bit of a double-edged sword. Yes, if you say it like that, it sounds really good, but realistically, and all teams do this, right? Sometimes you drag the game out too long, where 6-item builds, it means that your 10k gold lead is now meaningless, and then they get an edge on you, and then that's it. You get crushed after that. And, I mean, we see that in teams all over the world. Even this last week, like Game 5 between S and Sword, Sword had a substantial advantage, and they just refused to close the game, and then S was able to make a comeback.
When you say that, Monty, that sounds like blasphemy to... That's like... It sounds like what happens is Froggen's that guy, right, who he works really diligently, he gets his paycheck, he always puts away 70%, he's investing into stocks and bonds, and then one day he finds out that a mixture of inflation, stock market crash, a depression in the economy, all that savings was worth nothing. I was like, oh, what? I saved that all up, I was going to buy some awesome shit, I could have had shit before if I'd bought it, like... They're like, yeah, that's how the economy works, son. You have to keep spending. So there's a little fiscal analogy for people there. I know they love those. Tabzz, you must have a response to this. Because I get here's why I want to set this up, okay? I get the sense that it's not that there's like just different words being used here. I get the sense you and European teams in general have a different philosophy on how the game's played, right?
I think it's also... In Europe, teams, if they're behind, they tend to like not contest any objectives and sometimes even just hide in their base, and they pick accordingly. So 6 is like really often picked, and even Seraph now. And it's really hard if you don't have like a really big advantage to do much else than just keep on taking dragons and big barons. Like I think our game against Gambit, I think last week, kind of exemplifies that, where they think they picked 6, and then we got a pretty big lead. We won our lanes, and we couldn't really break through their defense, so we just had to keep taking all their buffs all the time and just taking dragons and baron. Eventually we could end it. I guess that's kind of the story of EU LCS at the time, where people just don't, when they fall behind, they don't really try and come back into the game. They just suffer a slow death, and it's hard to break that. It's hard to break that defense.
What I find so funny is like, you guys have exactly the opposite problem that CLG has, where CLG, like against LMQ, we're just gonna like, you know, try and close the game too quickly, where we go for like a super early Baron or something like that. You know, we play that more aggressive style, and sometimes that results in like a massive throw, right? Like against this week against LMQ, but we often, you know, CLG has like the shortest average game length in the NA LCS, so we either lose or win very quickly, right? Whereas like EU, like you're saying, you kind of get choked out, and your style of winning, the flaw in your style is you make a comeback late game possible due to just letting the enemy team turtle and like slowly catch up, and then maybe you lose. Like a great example going back to it is that Millennium game you guys played 2 weeks ago, where like, you know, that's literally exactly what happened.
Yeah, like one misplay, they get back into the game. That's basically what happened.
Right. And then, but the problem with CLG is that we play too aggressively, right? Like the game against LMQ, where we had a really bad Baron call that was far too early, and we should have been more patient. So obviously, like the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, but it's just a stylistic difference.
Finding the balance. It's like finding the balance. Like obviously, there should be like a best decision at all times in order to close out the game, like theoretically. But like it's all up to like own styles of play. Like how do you decide what is your win condition you set for your team? Like how do you want to win this game?
Yeah.
And like I agree. Sometimes we don't create enough opportunities. That's also I suppose up to our players we have and our play styles. Like Wicked tends to like to farm a bit more and not really go with the team and create plays like that, and maybe our support tends to be a bit less like playmaky as well. He just tries to like secure things and secure vision, but never really play super aggressively or try to make aggressive plays, and it shows in our game style in that same sense.
Yeah, I think it's just fun to look at the difference between teams, and yeah, I just see that like Alliance and CLG are like on pretty opposite ends of that spectrum right now, so it's cool to talk about.
So the kryptonite to Alliance then, Monty, would be like old school Blaze, modern day Najin Shield. These teams would be like the kryptonite, because you'd let them get to the late game where they want to be, and then they'd win, right?
I would think that Alliance would have a hard time against more of those styles of teams, and conversely, if you can play conservatively enough, like they would do well against a team like the KT Arrows, which has a lot of early aggression, as long as they could avoid kind of dying early.
So something that Monty referenced a bit earlier on was like, does a team understand their win conditions in the game? Like, do they understand what it is that they have to do? And obviously the other side to that is, do they understand, like in this example here, what the other team's trying to do? Like if the other team is turtling to try and wait until, you know, the gold difference becomes irrelevant, everyone has 6 items, then that's when you need to know if you need to cut them off now and you have to take some kind of decisive action, okay? In this sort of context, Tabzz, how good of a job do you and the players in game and the coaching staff out of the game have of like knowing, like when we get this comp, we know exactly what we're going to do and when we're going to win the game with it and what we're going to do if we're behind and what we do if we're ahead? How would you gauge how good Alliance is at that? Your mic went off again.
Hello?
Yeah, it's back on again now.
Hello?
Okay, keep going. Weird. I'll let you know if that happens.
There's like this button on my mic that if I press it, I think it deactivates. So if I like sit on it, it's like deactivates all the time. That's probably why.
Fair enough.
But yeah.
Who's your gear sponsor?
I think this is HyperX headset actually.
HyperX. Let's get on
it. Anyway, yeah, so we have somewhat of an idea when we get into the draft and like how we want to play out the game, and if we want to lane swap or not, like how we're gonna play the game. Sometimes a bit more than other times. It really depends how the draft goes. in general, though. We just tend to like go with how the game goes, and then we just make decisions based off like we think how the game has been flowing, like what should we do to win now. So we try to re-establish what we have to do to win in the game itself. What's our next objective? What do we do to win right now, rather than doing it before the game.
Are there actually European teams who you think are better at that approach, Monty, of like understanding in game what these conditions are?
No, I think that Alliance does a good job, and even when the game's, it's just that Alliance sometimes plays a style that like drags the game out, like Ziggs, Gragas, or stuff like that. So I think that they have a good grasp on that aspect. Yeah.
After you
back at some of the games.
Okay. See if you can come up with one.
Well, I mean, I just think in general that's I've seen like a pretty good understanding of team compositions. Again, like I think that the aggressive use of a power spike isn't there. So, but I've said that was a flaw that I thought of in their play.
From the outside, Tabzz, as like someone who's in Alliance and you're watching Fnatic, they had like their bad start to the season. It wasn't that bad. They were like mid-table and they were like 50% record, but they were, by their standards, that's bad. Okay, when we look at their lineup, you're like, that's a team that must be top 2 or top 3 in Europe. Like that's ridiculous if they're 4th or 5th. You know, when you saw that start, what did you put it down to? Were you really one of those guys who was like, oh, they're definitely going to pick it up at some point, or did you really think like, oh, maybe Fnatic's just not going to figure it out?
I don't think they would have ever picked it up if this meta would like be unchanged in the start of the season. I think they would still be mid-table instead of being second. Like if the game was still the same, they would still be mid-table, because few things like I think they didn't really pick up on the meta fast enough, like back then at least. And like Reckless has a more passive style of playing AD, where in that meta it was really good to have a very aggressive style of AD as well. So I think they would lose out on a lot of opportunities or ways to play.
Do you think that's true, Monty? You think that plays a role in why Fnatic's had the resurgence, where they could literally win the whole Super Week and now they're back at the top?
I think Fnatic is also a clutch team, and they've always performed when it matters across very different metas. I mean, they've won the EU LCS 3 times in a row. They've performed well at Worlds. I think it's really difficult. I think that they also are a team that gets lazy when it doesn't really matter, but they also know how to get their shit together. So I think that, sure, I agree that that's part of it, but I think that there's also something outside of the game with that team that affects their performance, and that they can go on these big streaks.
Yeah, I do think that they had a lot of internal problems as well. I think that when they start losing, that their mood goes down the shitter. Like, it will go like really badly. I think even some of their teammates actually like really didn't like each other, like saying bad things about each other at the time. And the team atmosphere is just really bad, and you don't really improve if like everyone is just hating on each other and nobody's actually enjoying playing the game or practicing.
And also, we have seen, you know, we've seen a noted lack of motivation in that team, a very public lack of motivation in that team, or preparation at times. But now it seems like they're starting to take things seriously again. Obviously, Aaron is doing work as coach. Like, they've made infrastructure changes too. So I think that, yes, the meta has helped them, but I don't think it's just the meta shift. I think we can take a look at a lot of things with that team that have contributed to an improving performance.
I would agree, but I would say it's also one of the catalysts, because it's like, okay, so the meta change, they start winning, and all of a sudden they feel so powerful again. You know, like as a team, they feel so good because, wow, like we're suddenly winning and we're doing so good. And that can also just help develop the team mood into like really positively.
Okay, Tabzz, you remember at All Stars when Fnatic got kind of shown up and then they got completely styled on by Fnatic in the SKT in the semi-finals, and it was like so bad, and obviously the backlash against Europe and like, oh, does Fnatic even practice, you know, all that stuff. You were one of the people who chimed in on that, and you said about how, you know, like the European scene, people care more about streaming and this and like that. You essentially kind of like were one of the voices who was dissenting and saying like, oh, I don't think the European scene is like in the right place to compete in this sense. Have your thoughts changed on that at all now? Was Fnatic like a good lightning rod for that? Like, were they a good example of that problems?
Well, they made it very public, and it was like really easy to highlight that issue and use it as an example as well at that time, because obviously they weren't really like Soas had to defend himself, saying we're the most dedicated team, shut up everyone, and like Cyanide was apparently showing up hungover to scrims, as you all know, and yeah, it's like really easy to highlight some of the problems that we have, which is people getting lazy, especially like team like Fnatic. You like Monte already said, like they just get lazy sometimes, and in general that also points to a different kind of mindset that organizations and teams have, in my opinion. Where I feel like a coach can help out a lot, or just someone who keeps these like young people's brains in the right direction and keeps them on point all the time and make sure that they are pulling the biggest out of this lineup that they can, which is I don't think is possible without like good infrastructure behind the team.
Because if you're one of these teams that's in a position where you do well in seasons or whatever, like Lemon Dogs finished top in the regular season, Fnatic still won the split. Alliance had that sick run towards the end of the last split, Fnatic still won the split. When they're winning like at the last minute like that, it can sort of feel, maybe if you're a really good team as well, like, oh, this is bullshit, man. Like we were in position and then, oh, they're so lucky that, you know, things always just go their way in the playoffs. Like it sounded like there was a little bit of edge behind there, like you don't entirely buy that Fnatic's like, oh yeah, you don't. Do you buy that story of like, listen, the sun rises, the sun sets, Fnatic always wins the EU LCS split. Nothing will change. Like it will always happen. You don't really buy that this split.
This split, I would have bought it the least out of any split so far. If you asked me at the start of the split, when the meta was like that, but right now I do think there's a chance that they are gonna win it. And it's obviously not a given, and it depends on a lot of factors. Like they could easily have had that bad run the whole split, if they didn't manage to improve it in time, or they kept being lazy, they could have easily ended mid-table and not gone to World like that last season when they didn't even go. And well, wait, was it season 2? I think it was season 2. Where
season 2,
season 2, yeah.
Yeah, like the same thing could happen. Like, where they just don't pull it together. Okay, they have pulled it together the last splits, but it just shows that they're a really volatile team that is influenced by a lot of factors, and you just have to somehow push that to the right direction when it really matters. And so far they've managed to do it in most times, but also haven't managed to do it in other times, so you never really know what's gonna happen. And I don't think it will be a given forever. It's like saying like Gambit was on top, you know, they'll be on top forever because they're the best team. And okay, now they're like facing relegations. It's like the worst team in the EU, and nobody would have thought that would happen back in the day. Like things can change.
No, that's the good counter example, because Gambit is the best one, because Gambit was the one where people used that logic of like, well, they always finish top 4 with the Edward lineup, therefore don't worry, they'll always be top 4. And then last split, well, we saw it didn't carry over because in that moment they weren't top 4, and so they fell out and they had a bad time. So Monty, do you, even though the standings say they're very, very close, I get the sense that Monty actually still thinks that Alliance is the best team. Like they're clear cut in some sense. Is it close between them and Fnatic? Are they? Is Alliance like? Can you put your stamp of approval like they are the best EU team?
No, I don't think I can anymore because of how much Fnatic has picked it up and because of how dominant that they've looked in their game so far. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it because teams have ups and downs typically over a course of a season. And yeah, the changes may have hit Alliance a little bit harder, but guys look good last week. So like I said, against those were kind of middle of the pack teams. So I'm really curious as to what you guys are going to be looking like in the last 2 weeks. And then we can have definitely a much better gauge on that too, because I do see the definite improvement in you guys as of the last week.
I was also
Tabzz,
loving
move your mic a little bit down for the day. There you
like
go.
Like this?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Right. I was also loving it, okay, when Fnatic had the bad streak, even though I like some of the Fnatic players, because of the fact that, you know, I like it when someone was on top for a while, okay, and so players know, like, it looks bad if you say, like, the team who's winning isn't that good because they're kicking your ass, you know. But when that team drops off, that's when the Sharks all, like, swarm around, okay, and they're like, yeah, I always thought they were overrated, and yeah, now, you know, finally they've been exposed. So at that point, okay, I can understand your reasoning here where you'd have said, like, okay, we're much better than Fnatic, like, they won't do that, they'll be mid-table, we'll win. But then I've noticed, once Fnatic started gaining all those wins, and now they're like right there with you at the top of the table. You have a kind of scenario now that used to exist in tennis, right? When Roger Federer won everything, he used to just win like 3 out of the 4 Grand Slams every year. Finally, Rafael Nadal came along, right? And then he starts winning Grand Slams, and suddenly, okay, Federer doesn't win everything anymore, but Federer and Nadal combined win everything. So he's sort of like, you could tell by the way he dealt in the media, he'd sort of be like, okay, I won't talk shit on that guy, but I'll just be like, but the two of us win everything. So listen, the two of us shit on all the rest of you guys. Like, stay down there in your place. Like, That's where you and Fnatic are right now. Right now, you're just like, okay, we'll share the throne, but we do rule Europe. You are all below us. You are peons.
Well, that's how I'd like it to be anyway. That would be really nice. Right now, if we can pick up our shakiness and just get back to our old form, then yeah, we can definitely be that. And yeah, also Fnatic can share the throne, hopefully. That would be really nice, actually. Like, even in the start of the split, I was like, even when Fnatic was doing bad, I was like, I really hope I don't face them in playoffs, because Fnatic's always gonna pull out some new shit or like pull out something new, like train really hard 1 week for playoffs. So I actually hope they would get like second place and we could stay first, so we didn't have to face them at all. So that actually happened, which is really nice. So that's actually pretty
until
good
the finals, right? But you wouldn't have to face them for a slot at Worlds.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point.
Before we get into this, and I just want to sidebar, it's really unlikely that you're going to get knocked out of the top 2 right now, because you're 4 games ahead of Millennium with 6 games left. So, I mean, I mean, it's possible, but probably not going to happen. But you shouldn't take that lightly, you know. Just saying, don't rest on your laurels. But to go back to something that was said earlier that we didn't really get to talk about, that Thorin mentioned, which is that the streaming and stuff in the West having an effect on the mentality of the teams. I just want to really double down on that statement, because it really can't be emphasized enough. One of the biggest differences in terms of mentality between Koreans and the West happens due to streaming, because players are able to be celebrities without actually having results in the West, and they will continue to make a lot of money based on the stream viewership, whereas in Korea that's not possible. The other thing that I think that makes Korea increasingly competitive is that the format of champions, you have 6 games in group stage to make the playoffs, and you have to make the playoffs, and you have to pretty much make a finals if you want to have any hope at making the World Championship at the end of the year. Whereas LCS, week in, week out, there's so many games, like it doesn't really matter if you lose a couple, like 1 week, you can still take that first place. But if you lose 2 games in champions, like your chances of getting out of groups drastically lower, your chances of going to Worlds therefore drastically lower as well. So the stakes per game are just so much higher in Korea, and so you have to win on just based on format all the games pretty much. And then the other thing is that you don't have another way to make money or, you know, be famous unless you're a winner in Korea. Culturally, that's true, but it's just also true because there's a lack of streaming from the professional players. So I think that is a factor. Like, that's a fire under the ass of the Koreans that just doesn't exist in the West. And there's nothing we can do about it. And I see this reflected, you know, in all Western teams, CLG included. Because of these factors, it is to a certain degree impossible to motivate players as much as the format and the reality of professional gaming in Korea motivates their players.
Yeah. If I can talk, I feel like the LCS format is just really bad in that sense, where you just create really uninteresting games. Like, okay, you win or lose, but all it is like 1 point on the table, and there's so many games over 3 months for every split. It's really drawn out and tiring, and the games don't even feel that important at all. Like, compared to, like I say, I've been playing competitive since Season 2, so when I was playing in Season 2, I would go to, okay, like the money wasn't nearly as big for me. I was an amateur player, but I would go to tournaments, I would go to LANs, I would have a blast, and like every game would be really impactful because you would go to the next round or you would get knocked out, or to the loser's bracket, which is, you just really get the adrenaline pumping, and it's like just really fun overall. Where in the LCS, it just feels so much more boring as a player. It's long, drawn out, many games, they don't feel as impactful.
I've even got a point actually about the format of LCS that I've never heard anyone make, but I think it's pretty valid, which is the worst thing about the Super Week is, on paper, is obviously the idea that, okay, it's really hard to prepare for 4 teams, and you really can't. You just have to like have some general strategy, apply it to one team, try and make an adjustment with another. So here's the problem, right? That on itself is, on its own merits, is a bad thing, and you can pick that apart. But here's another way to think of it as to why it messes up the rest of the season. Because it means, imagine I'm a team, like I'll take an example, SK Gaming, okay? SK Gaming seem like they have a really good approach to like planning for teams, knowing what they're going to do, pick priority, knowing what they'll do in a game, and as a result they can beat better teams than them. Well, let's say SK Gaming does all this hard work on 1 week and they win 2-0, then on another week they do all this hard work, they win 2-0 again. if things go to shit on Super Week, where they can't use that practice to the same degree, they could go 0-4, and all their hard work of all those wins is now nothing. It's completely erased. So actually, the Super Week doesn't even just fuck up the Super Week. It actually messes up the overall table in that sense as well. Like, I mean, if you go into Super Week, Tabzz, how much can you really have practiced for like the third team that you're going to play?
Yeah, you basically just try to practice as much as possible for the, like, you prepare for the teams that you think are the biggest challenge. So let's say the other top contenders for your spot, try to create some strategies against them, and then for the others you just use your regular old strategy that you know and tested for so much. But yeah, I do agree on what you're saying, and also what it creates is that you play 4 games on like one patch. Like in, let's say if Super Week was held earlier in the split, then you would have been playing on a different patch. So it just really depends as well on that really creates a big difference too, I think.
What do you think, Monty, on this structural point?
I think it's absolutely true. And the other thing, too, is that if you're preparing for the 2 teams that you're afraid of, well, what if there's a team lower in the standings and they're playing, you know, like a middle-of-the-pack team, they're playing 2 games against teams that are lower than them, and then all of a sudden, like, they're preparing for you, but you may not be preparing for them. It makes it really easy to get sniped in a Super Week.
One thing I want to ask, since, as Monty said, right, with the position that Fnatic and Alliance are in, you can pretty much guarantee that, okay, these will be the top 2 teams. It's just what order will it be in and how close will the other teams be in terms of, like, the gap between them. Well, as a result, people are going to look to, like, okay, these teams will be in the semi-finals. So then we have to, like, start shadowboxing. So the teams after you that potentially you can place in the semi-finals is teams like Millennium. It's teams like Super Hot Crew. On paper... Okay, here's what I want to ask you, Tabzz. On paper, if you'd have asked me with this Millennium lineup, like, could that be a good team? I'd say yes. Because actually, even last split when they were fucking terrible, I used to look at the lineup and go, this doesn't make any sense. They've got some really good players. Why are they so bad? Okay, that team, I can understand why they could turn it around. How is Super Hot Crew a top 4 team in Europe? Like, what am I missing here?
Well, I think it's just because of the rest of the teams are bad. Like, I think this split is, like, lower quality than the last split was as well, in terms of team strengths. Maybe also why we are doing so well. But yeah, I feel like teams overall are not as strong at the moment. That's why a team like Super Hot Crew, okay, they have some good mechanical players and they know somewhat how to play the game. And yeah, they can get a pretty damn good standing just because of that. Because let's say Rocket had an awful show, and like Gambit has been doing terrible as well. And Wolves is really weak and constantly making even roster changes now. So you just get like such weak teams that a middle of the pack team can actually move up.
So let's talk about some of those teams then. When you looked at the Copenhagen Wolves lineup, I actually did an interview with Youngbuck when they made those changes, okay? And one of the points I made to him in that interview was like, come on, don't try and tell me that Woolite is going to be better than Forgiven and Airwax is going to be better than Amazing. Like, listen, I could believe they could be good for your team, and maybe even like the synergy will be all those lovely buzzwords will be awesome and trickling down everywhere, and there'll be hugs all over the place, but they're not going to be better players. And he was telling me, listen man, like, you don't understand, they are going to be better, like the team's going to be better. Like, when you look on paper, it makes absolute sense why Copenhagen Wolves is a bad team. Am I wrong?
No, it makes sense. I would have said the exact same thing as you. I thought Forgiven was one of the best AD carries in Eurobest, and like Amazing was a really good jungler with high presence and ganking, and like you just bring in 2 new players from solo queue, and they're obviously, I would say they're already weaker without even having seen them played. Like, I've played with Airwax and solo queue before, and he's never impressed me at all. And like Woolite has been an okay player, but he is really young and has no competitive experience pretty much. So Woolite's mechanics are pretty good, but his decision making is really horrible. So yeah, that's basically all I can say about that.
People made it sound, when I pieced it together from interviews, like the reason why Copenhagen Wolves had those good runs last split was because they were like really early to like abuse lane swaps and try and get people out of bad matchups, and then also they kind of realized, like, okay, Forgiven's like the star, we have to ride him completely, you know. So those 2 factors, well, in theory, those 2 factors don't apply now, right? Like, that do you see this as why they've fallen?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're relying on like different ways to beat teams now. You see them trying to invent a lot of new things, or like really prepare very hard for a certain team and create a certain strategy just to beat them, and that's how they pick up most of their wins, I feel.
Monty, do you ever even give a fuck or watch those bottom 3 teams in EU?
Nope.
They're just terrible, aren't they?
I try and avoid those matches.
Yeah, you should.
Actually, the thing Tabzz just said there even kind of defines what I see from those teams, which is that I think mentally they've sort of given up, because every single time their strategy seems to be like, we have a secret pick coming out, and they've just got some like wacky shit that they've got that like, well, we can't win just playing League of Legends the game, so let's just try to do the most fucking insane thing ever. It's like having like, it's like, you know, sometimes Wicked would win a game where he would win because he'd like do a pick, or Soaz even, where they'd do something where you'd only win because no one in the universe has ever played versus that champion playing that style. So they're essentially hoping that like their opponent is just even more clueless at what the fuck this matchup's gonna be like than them. And once you get into that world, like that's not a consistent way to be a top team. If you look at the teams now, Tabzz, is there any way for these teams to turn the corner? Can Gambit actually rise again? Can Copenhagen Wolves fix things? I mean, when you look at the rosters, these are rosters that deserve to be bottom of LCS, right?
Well, you can even propose the question if they're even like worthy to be in LCS at this point. Like, I would say they're
okay. Well, thanks for the invitation. I'll now propose that question: are they worthy to be in LCS?
And also segue this into expanding the LCS into 10 teams.
Yeah, okay.
And how you feel about that.
We'll go to that next. Are they worthy to be in LCS?
Even more fun matches. Well, I wouldn't say so, no. I don't think Wolves or Gambit is stronger than any Challengers team out there right now.
So Nip and H2K, they would be better than those two teams.
Yeah, I would love to see them come into LCS actually. More than I really like that change if that would happen.
Yeah, but here's the thing, as Monty just kind of referenced there, you say like I'd love to see them come into LCS. Well, yeah, but the thing is Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves might still be there. We still don't understand how that format will work. There might be 10 teams, Tabzz. Next season, I might be saying to Monty, do you even watch those bottom 5 EU LCS teams? He'd be like, I don't watch that shit, man.
The difference is the critical difference with the 10 teams, and what I like about I agree with Tabzz that we initially may get a few teams that don't really, aren't really LCS caliber. But I think if we look at how the LCS started, okay, there is a big discrepancy because there were all these established teams. There were teams like Fnatic, EG, CLG, TSM, Dignitas that were paying their players' salaries, that had gaming houses, that had a functional income, that were way better than the teams that were created like Team Marn, that were created and were subsisting off of the Riot salary. And so there was this exact same problem when the LCS was formed. Yet now we have, okay, so maybe first off, Gambit has established itself very well. And yeah, they're having some rough times at the moment, but they have a history and a pedigree. And now we have teams that like NIP, which in terms of esports history have an insane pedigree and are in the challenger scene. So when we expand to 10 teams, there may be some growing pains, I think, around expanding to 10 teams. But I think that by summer split, or even by the year after that, 10 teams is going to be looking pretty solid. Because there will be, some changeover at the bottom in terms of teams that maybe don't have that same level of history in esports, kind of like coming in and just living off the bare bones Riot salary and then getting knocked out and shit like that. But I think in the long run, it's a better call. And the other reason why I approve is that because fewer games, like 20 games or so, as opposed to 28, only the double round robin, it will make each game more impactful, no more super weeks, longer postseason, shorter regular season. I think these are all the changes all these changes are good for the scene.
I even have a reason that I don't see people usually mention, what I would have thought fans would be on board with, which is it means it's really unlikely that if you have a really talented player, like a Forgiven, a Nukeduck, these people, now there's almost no reason for them not to be in LCS. Even if they're not on a top team, listen, one of the bottom teams would want them, they're that talented. So it allows more of the talent to get in. Because actually in EU, we used to have this problem that people didn't reference that often, which was once you got splits where it was an entire Polish team in MYM and then Rockat, and you had Gambit were all only speaking Russian. Well, now you couldn't get into LCS if you couldn't get into the other 6 teams, because you're not going to get into those teams. So actually, talent was essentially sort of like cordoned off from a certain section of the league. And likewise, in NA, if you're born in America, you're not going to play for TSM, Jokes, obviously, there. But similar scenario, okay. So by having 10 teams, now we can have those talents. Now that plucky young guy who you know, is born in America. He has a dream of playing in LCS. He could play for the worst team in LCS, but he could be in LCS. That's the thing. He could get to play against some sub-tier Koreans that TSM have brought over to beat his ass.
And the other thing too to remember is that as the 10 team, yes, as the 10 team system, basically, I think also what you're thinking, Tabzz, is that there aren't going to be any more foreign teams that come over here. If it goes to 10 teams, the Chinese and the Koreans are coming for the NA and EU LCS. You know what I mean? I would put money down that, but if they expand to 10 teams, there will be either another full Korean or full Chinese roster in the LCS next season. Like,
but in
because
EU
it's just
LCS,
a great opportunity.
In EU LCS, Monty, you think there'll be a Korean or Chinese in EU?
Yeah, possibly.
Tabzz, here's another beautiful moment where I can get this philosophical, this sort of like perceptual chasm that exists between NA and EU, and I can elucidate it, okay? So for Monty, it's obvious, listen, that, okay, a team, like a Korean team or a Chinese could come in as NA LCS, and not only that, it's not even that implausible they could do well, like LMQ now is leading the league. I get the sense that if Tabzz watches NA LCS, okay, yeah, he'll credit when a team like CLG is improved and they have good strategy, or he watches Cloud9 and he's like, wow, they're very good in game, like very intelligent. But I get the sense that if Froggen, if Tabzz, if Wicked look at NA LCS, they're sort of like, come on guys, if a subpar Chinese team came into EU LCS, they wouldn't be beating our asses and running the table. And I was like, listen, we'll keep them down. We would beat them. A bad Korean team, bad Chinese team, we would beat them, okay, right?
Yeah, that's what we'd say, obviously.
Do you buy it, though?
That's what we'd say, at least.
Okay.
You know,
Deep down, do you believe it, though?
Yeah, I do, actually. I think Fnatic, Alliance actually have the tools at the moment. At least us two teams have the tools to keep down, like, a Korean or like Chinese subpar team from reaching at least the #1 spot. But I'm happy to welcome like any kind of competition, because I like it when a really strong team would come over, because it would improve the league as a whole, actually. But I wouldn't let them have rank 1, of course.
Okay,
and
Monty,
you know, like the sun comes up and goes down, so. You know, Korean team can never have rank 1
Monty,
in the playoffs.
Why do you let LMQ have rank 1? I don't know what, you know, why don't you just adopt this mentality that Tabzz has? Yeah, you know. Is there no pride? Where's your, it's America. Manifest destiny, motherfucker. Come on, what's going on?
Yeah, we can't even control our own continent anymore. No, I mean, CLG has been a little slump. I'm actually really surprised that we went 2-0 in the week before that. Yeah, so... I mean, we're just not playing at our best right now, that's for sure. And I think that what's interesting about LMQ is, well, first off, you can say that they were a 6th place team, but they've changed nearly all of their members. And you have to remember, too, that Ackerman was the top laner at the World Championship finals. And yes, like you could make arguments that that was a pretty poor series and that Royal got stomped and all that other stuff. But, I mean, he helped take down Fnatic.
He's taken down CLG a few times too.
Yeah, taken down CLG. And you know, to go back to LMQ, they're doing really well, and I think that LMQ is really good at, first off, team fighting. Second off, I think that they're a team that plays a very patient style where they wait for you to make a mistake, and they're very good at capitalizing on it in an extremely impactful way, and they're very decisive about how they capitalize on your mistakes. And a lot of people have been saying to me recently, like, oh, Monty, you know, why did you think that coming into the season that LMQ wasn't going to be that good of a team? Why? But here's the information that I had to go on. We scrimmed with them all of last split, right? And then watching, okay, Challenger games, which in effect they were stomping everybody so badly that it was inherently meaningless. But what I had to go on was an entire season worth of scrims with LMQ. The thing about, and I've discussed this on the show previously, the thing about LMQ and CLG is that when we scrim together, even today, the games are terrible. Like there are the scrims of CLG and LMQ. It is not unusual for there to be upwards of 70 kills at 30 minutes. Like they just go berserk in terms of all in on each other. And there's something about those teams like playing against each other where it just creates these bloodbath scenarios. So if you had seen what I had seen and like the kind of lack of patience that LMQ has, because usually they're initiating these all-ins and scrims, you would not believe that they could be as patient as they can be in LCS games. So that's where that came from. But definitely, I mean, LMQ is performing very well right now, and they know how to punish.
Oh, by the way, fuck all those people who ask you that question in that way. Like, why did you say that LMQ wouldn't be number one? No, it doesn't work that way. Burden of proof. Why did you think they would be number one? Because they, like, raped the amateur scene? Oh, well, congrats. That's a really good logic there. It's well and good after the fact to say it, isn't it? Like, oh, it was obviously going to happen that way. Like, Tabzz, when you saw LMQ and how well they've done, and at the moment, look, they're looking like they're going to finish top 2. That's the way it's going at the moment. How did they do it? I mean, when I watch them, they just win team fights. Like, that's all I can say they do. They win team fights, they go to the Baron, they kill people there, and they win the game. Like, it's like season fucking 1 League of Legends.
Oh yeah, I don't watch much NA, like, but from what I've seen is that they just play like really aggressive. From the few games I have seen, at least in their lanes, and they just try to make things happen, and it works for them. That's like what I can see from the few games I have watched.
I mean, they play aggressively when they know they have an advantage, and I think that that's what they're good at. So, and they're also extremely good at farming, and so they can hang in games longer than a lot of other teams as a result. But they're a pretty good team, I have to say.
Okay, Tabzz. So this team LMQ, they're good at team fighting, they're good at farming, and they're good at staying in games. I mean, it's going to be fun when Alliance and Fnatic play them, right?
Well, yeah, guys, you're gonna have the EU LCS all over again. I think they're pretty welcome in our league, actually. Okay. They could come by anytime. It would be fun to play them.
Okay, the challenge has been put out there for LMQ. Now you just have to relocate to another continent, start over again, just to work your way into EU LCS.
Yeah.
Okay. When you actually look at the rest of NA LCS Tabzz,
I don't.
Okay, well, hypothetically, if you were to, for some reason, like if I sat you down like fucking Malcolm from Clockwork Orange, I put matchsticks under your eyes, and I was like, "Look at him, Tabzz! Look at Doublelift! Look at him! He gets a quadro, and they still lose the game."
I watched one game, and then I think it was against TSM, and he played Tristana, and it was pretty painful to watch.
And you just saw that in the champ select, and you were like, "Fuck, X this box down. I'm not going to go and play solo queue. This is fucking bullshit. No one plays Tristana."
Yeah, but I saw some hooks that game though. I wasn't very fortunate for Doublelift.
Yeah, and well, I mean, yeah, watch the one game this season we lose to TSM. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's like that's the game I watched actually.
Yeah, he didn't play well that game.
But when you look at the other NALCS teams in theory, so the weird thing about NALCS is that they had this deadlock at the top for so long where basically you couldn't really point to any one team and say they were the best. Each had a different reason for being the best. So okay, Cloud9 had the best record against top teams, but then they were doing badly against the low teams. TSM smashed all the low teams, they did badly against the top teams. Dignitas, CLG and LMQ, okay, all had good records, but they would sort of like, they were like a trifecta, like LMQ loses to Dig loses to CLG, like there was like a triangle like that. So again, you couldn't pick one out. Is there a team out of the NA teams who you think, like for Tabzz' money, this is the best one for whatever criteria he prefers? Which one do you think is the best?
From what I've seen, I would say LMQ or CLG. From what I've seen earlier in the season, I thought CLG played really well. Or like, I really liked the way they were rotating and playing, rotating. But yeah, I really like LMQ's aggression. I really love playing, like watching their AD carry play actually. Like Vasily is really fun because he's kind of like me where he tries to like jump in and do crazy things, and I really like that play style. So I would say for those criteria, I would put those two at the top. If I had to choose one, I don't know. It would be hard to choose.
I mean, I think that we're just not playing as well as LMQ is right now. I think we were in the middle of the season playing better, but right now it's.
But right now.
Yeah, it's been a little. I mean, I think CLG is just not playing up to standards, and I mean, we'll work on that. Obviously, we want top 2 as well because that makes getting to Worlds significantly easier. But I was watching scrims this morning, and our practices, it seems to be going okay this week so far. And we know our flaws, and the team is working on it. So we'll see how the last 6 games go. Obviously, they're pretty damn important, much more important for us than they are for you because you're in a more comfortable lead is the word. But everybody, the playoffs are so important this season too, because that #1 spot, we've discussed this on the show before, but there are only 3 Korean teams. One of the groups is not going with, and because we know how Riot seeds things, it's going to be the group with the first place NA or the first place EU team is not going to have a Korean team in it. So getting first place is probably going to be ultra important. We don't know which group that is yet because we have no idea what the seeding. We have not released seeding information for the groups of worlds for whatever reason. I'm not sure why that hasn't been released yet, because it's just, you know, NA first place is in this group, NA second place is in this group, NA third place is in this group. Like you could release that anytime, Riot, like literally anytime. But one of those groups, I guarantee, will not have a Korean team.
It's because I imagine when it's someone in Riot's job, okay, to be figuring these things out, the logistics, planning ahead. And what happens is he's in his office with his feet up on the table and he's got a big stack. His inbox is like, and his outbox has got a couple of things in there like, fuck Gambit next Monday. Alex, keep track of Alex Ich. He has now left Gambit. Be sure to keep pins on him. And then he's sat there. He's destroying Candy Crush. Listen, this guy's he's putting in work. But then someone comes in like, Benson, didn't I tell you about, do we have the numbers for when the World Championships begin? And he's like, yes, boss, I've just got them right here. It'll start next Monday. Okay, well done. And then someone when that gets announced officially, someone's like, but wait a minute, doesn't OGN finish on the Monday? He's like, I knew you'd say that, and that's why I meant on the Tuesday. But I'm sorry that you misunderstood my communication there. You don't do it again, but I forgive you this time. And I'm Riot, and so everything I said was like, okay. And next thing, World Season 7 will be held in Singapore. Just one game. Thank you. This is the end of my announcement. Okay, that's the end of the Riot impression there. Not even sure it was better than the Wicked one, actually.
The one reason why they wouldn't release the bracket seeding is because since all the regionals are happening at different times, they may not want teams like gunning for certain seeds in certain groups, because like we're going to know where the teams in Korea are after the 16th and 17th, and obviously Chinese and NA regionals are going to be happening after that fact. But at the same time, the flip side to that is that the problem is, like, how do we know that Riot is being fair? Because they could also be stacking the groups as the seeds come in as well. So I can see it both ways.
Yeah, just make it quite a bit more random, because like, alright, maybe third place is actually a better seed than first place, considering the power level of the teams at that point. So yeah, that would create like a really weird situation if Riot didn't do it.
Right, but what I'm saying is like the problem is that when Riot starts seeing the seeds, then they can shift the groups around to make it more preferential for, you know, certain regions or for certain teams. Like this is like a double-edged sword, right? I can see why they wouldn't want the teams to, you know, if they say, oh, third place, the third seed is actually better than the second seed, we're going to throw, right? But at the same time, Riot could say, oh, well, you know, like we think Alliance is in first place. They have the best chance at making a deep no Korean team in their group, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, the key thing is when you make things random, Monty. You know, in my world, when things are random, you know, what that usually means is anything could happen. But actually it's weird, because in the Riot world, when you use that random number generator, it always seems to come up with some like weird favorable result. Like Season 2 Worlds, they have a random draw, okay, to decide which team's region doesn't get straight into the round of 8. And weirdly, Korea, boom, straight down there. So not Southeast Asia, no, Korea straight down. Say Season 3 Worlds, which team's #1 team doesn't get to go straight? Europe. Sorry, Europe. We fucked you with the servers, now we got you with the seeding, you know. That's about it. So here's my question, okay. Whenever we have someone on this show, one of the themes is we try to get them to pick, you know, who were the 3 teams from your country who are going to Worlds, how would they do there, like hypothetically shadow box it. But isn't this season, Tabzz, I'm assuming you watch OGN, isn't this season like the most scary season to have to go to Worlds and face Korean teams? Because there's a good chance the 3 best teams in the world will come from Korea and all be in OGN, only in the World Championship, right?
Yeah, it looks less and less likely that we're going to have some sort of Najin Blacksword outlier this year, where they're like coasting on their winter season
Like even that third
victory.
seed could, in theory, be like the third best team in the world.
Right, and the scariest thing about just to highlight this, so we've got Blue, White, and K that are on top of the ladder, the circuit point standings right now, and because of this way the season is working out and the way circuit points are going, basically 2 of those teams are going to pretty much more than likely take those top 2 seeds because Shield has already been eliminated from quarterfinals. So the interesting thing is, okay, whoever makes it the furthest, some combination of White, Blue, and K are likely to beat in the semifinals, and therefore one of them will make the finals and probably take the top in circuit points. So the scary thing is you have the 2 best performing teams this season will likely be ahead in terms of circuit points and get those 2 slots. And then in the third, to go run the gauntlet for the 3rd place match, probably that other team will take it, but maybe, just maybe, there's Shield regains their footing, or the KT Arrows or the Jin Air Stealths like really catch on fire and are able to like kind of move up. So then you have the 2 teams that are definitely powerful right now, and this time, instead of the KT Bullets being eliminated in that 3rd place match, which was a tragedy of last year's like World Championship, was that they weren't there as like probably the 2nd best team in the world at the time. We're going to have either White, K, or Blue in that 3rd position, and they're just going to be historically a good team and still on top of their game, or we're going to have somebody who's just like totally on fire, totally on a hot streak going into Worlds, coming in that 3rd place. Either way, it's good for Korea.
Anyone who likes to edit videos, you literally have a clip there of Monty with a fist raised like this saying the word white. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. That could be used in so many ways, okay? Maybe the word power afterwards. I'm sure we've said power rankings at some point. Like, just be creative, okay?
Jesus,
that's all I'm telling you.
No.
I'm just telling you. Just get on that, guys. Tabzz, but if you go to Worlds, okay, the original question, is this like the scariest one?
Probably, yeah. I would say so. It's like really fucking scary actually. Now if you put it like that, it sounds even scarier. Like there's no chance for anyone to win except Koreans. So like the white power thing is quite wrong. But yeah.
Well, I think it's quite wrong anyway, Tabzz. But anyway, yeah, in this context
it's
it's
really
wrong
funny
too.
how you brought that up. As for Monte Cristo, it was like a Korean fanboy, obviously. But yeah.
I'm a COG fanboy. I don't know what you're talking about.
Fanboy?
Well, I feel very sorry for you, Monty. I pity you. I hope you get over this difficult phase in your life and
Hey,
pick
I
up
was a
good teams.
KT Bullets fan too. I only know suffering. Thorin.
Okay.
But yeah,
Tabzz.
it's pretty damn
Here's
scary.
the thing, though. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Tabzz. Because I always, as I'm like doing interviews and as I'm watching other interviews, I build up a mental picture of what someone's like and how they would think, and that's how I try to ask my questions when I do the interview with them. So whenever I see interviews with Froggen, the mental picture I have built up is that Froggen's the kind of guy where part of why he is the way he is that he has like almost an irrational self-confidence. Sometimes it's based on being really good, but he has the kind of confidence where, like I've said before, I actually think he's the only person crazy enough to think if he did play Faker, that maybe he'd just beat him 1v1 and he'd like kill him in lane and he'd like outfarm him and like he'd just hold Faker down and be like, listen, you haven't been an EU LCS boy. Like, this is what we do with mid laners. So I get the sense that, even if Tabzz will acknowledge, like, listen, man, fucking Imp and Def, they're sick. It'd be really hard if I had to go and play him in Korea. I think your team leader guy, your Froggen, he would think like, listen, guys, Alliance could win. I went over there with CLGU. I almost won OGN. Like, listen, we could win this. We could actually win Worlds. What do the rest of your team think about this sort of topic, do you think? How would you characterize how they would see it?
Well, for myself and Froggen, it's pretty similar. Like, I don't think I would be scared or like overly respect my opponent and like make mistakes because of that. I don't think anyone in our team really would be, to be honest. Like, I don't think Shu gives a fuck who he's facing. He just does his shit like always. Like, he has his own playstyle and he doesn't care what the enemy does. And the same goes kind of for Froggen and me. Like, for Wicked and If, I'm not really sure. Like, I feel like they could be having that kind of pressure where they feel like their enemy is like unbeatable or we should be losing. But for the rest of the team, I think we'll be alright.
Monty, I think I asked you this on the last episode that we had where we had Soaz on, and you said something like semi-finals was the best that someone like Alliance could do, and then probably only then if they had a nice bracket draw, etc. I asked this question before when we had I think when we had Crumbs on, to like, if we could hypothetically come up with a team for Dignitas, like which international teams would be bad and which would be good. Let's do it with the different regions. For NA, which would be the teams who'd be best suited to have a chance against Alliance, do you think, Monty?
I think CLG would be interesting. I think LMQ would be interesting. And I think Cloud9, probably. I think that Dignitas would kind of meet their match in the solo lanes, and they would just get... I don't think that their bottom lane is anywhere near the caliber of Tabzz and Nif.
Check that, Kiwi Pie. What do you think, Tabzz? What's your sense on if you had to play a CLG or...
Wait, if I played Dignitas in the boat, and
yeah, that was pretty good.
I don't know.
Good match.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, different. Very different.
Was that actually a game though, or was it a dance-off? I forget.
Yeah, I think a bit of both. Had a really nice ending to it as well.
By the way, that's how bitch-made League fans are. That literally, within the game, there's a function that allows you to do a dance. But if you dare to press that button, you are the most disrespectful person. Like, what the fuck world is this? In the game, you kill people, but you're not allowed to dance. Remember, dancing is impolite. It's perfectly fine.
Disrespectful.
It's perfectly fine to have like a 10k gold lead, be up like 17 kills, but not close the game out and just abuse the team constantly, force them into shit Baron fights and just humiliate them. But if you dare press that dance button, motherfucker, you better have an apology ready, a lawyer, and a fucking one of those things that stops like the noose from killing you. You know, where you put like a little thing in that blocks. Like, you better have all three of those things because you're going down, motherfucker. Like,
yeah,
Tabzz, that was ludicrous. Why did you apologize there? Alex Garfield just came in like he had a big sack of money and he said, "I'm just saying, guys." There's a written confession here, and if anyone signs it, they're going home with a little goodie bag. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, that's how the community is, isn't it? But like, okay. if you spawn dive my favorite team and you make Scarra look sad on camera, you're gonna have to apologize, you know. But yeah, I think it's a bit overdone. Like, I think taking professionalism to a certain point is a good thing, but I don't think that this kind of little BM things should be so discouraged or looked down upon by the community. I think it's really over exaggerated.
Monty, what did you think on that topic? I don't think I've ever heard you comment on it. You usually side with like the professional. Listen, we should all be professionals.
What the hell? I'm also just like an ultra trash talker. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay, so give me the raw, uncut.
No. I mean, I think a little bit of trash talking or showmanship is fine. Like, I don't confuse that with being like having professionalism with being professional. I don't think there was anything like, okay, when you score a goal in soccer, you like rip off your shirt and run around the field, like whatever, you know, it's fine. That's part of sports. You score a touchdown in football, you do your little dance, or like when you tackle somebody, you make the big play, like fine, you know, whatever. That just adds to the excitement and the drama.
Yeah, maybe when you kill someone in a video game, you have to teabag them.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever.
Maybe that's the next step for Riot and that Riot Light guy who like tries to fucking use doublespeak to like mind fuck everyone on a regular basis, right? That's the next step, Monty. They're gonna allow you to be reported for dancing, and they're gonna be like, "Did you know that Nukaduk danced in over 90% of his games in Challenger? That is why we have banned him."
It's gonna be like a little tip on the top of every screen.
Yeah,
you know,
listen, players who don't dance win 20% more of their games.
See, that's the thing, is like, I in my mind, and people obviously may disagree with this, the difference between professional sports fun trash talking and unprofessional trash talking is really only how clever you are in doing it, right? I mean, or the professionalism in terms of what you can and can't say. Like, obviously, I agree with the concept of the bans that Riot handed out to certain players for being just incredibly inappropriate in their language and you know, saying very kind of disturbing things that aren't socially acceptable things to say. But the act of trash talking in and of itself is best done when it actually like has some intelligence or cleverness behind it. Like, I'll take, for example, OD comes on, starts calling everybody a cunt. Like, that's just offensive. Like, there's something clever about that. Like, that's just horrible. And then he gets fined. I come back at Twitter on OD, and he's making references to it being raining in Monte Carlo. whenever CLG loses, and then I send him a link of a weather report of a sunny day in Monte Carlo. That is subtle and clever. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference. And I think that trash talking is fine because it builds up hype for the fans, and it creates a storyline for a rivalry between teams, and that's okay. Like, as long as it's done in a more, I think, subtle manner, it can be entertaining.
By the way, the whole Odie thing was never that big a deal. Okay, it had to be dealt with, obviously.
Look, I just had an owner,
but it's an owner doing stuff. Yeah, it had to be dealt with, but that's in the past now. With that said, I just want to let me just jump in and give one little caveat before we continue. There's always a thing whenever someone says the word cunt who's British. There's always the thing where people post on Reddit like, actually in Britain that's actually perfectly fine to just say all the time. Like, everyone does it. Like, that is not at all true. Like, the Queen does not wake up like, Philip, you cunt, where are you today? And then when a little baby is born and goes and gets like baptized, they're like, what's the little cunt's name? Oh, I bless you in the prayers. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, it's still really offensive to say. Like, you wouldn't say that in front of your grandma. She'd be like, what? Like, you only say that when you don't like someone. Yeah, if you were close friends, you might do it, but we're not your friends, guy. We're not your buddy, pal. Like,
And also, I think that trash talking is acceptable when it relates to the game's performance. When you're making personal attacks, it's not cool.
Tabzz, do you like to trash talk?
Yeah, kinda. Well, if you put it like that, like, I'm not like the fucking mean guy that will trash talk everyone, but if someone's having like a really unlucky game, like, it's alright to point it out.
I've actually noticed that in Europe we have a weird thing. The reason why everyone thinks people in Europe are toxic is because when the American does his trash talk, it's like so obviously in a joking manner. It'll be like, oh, I owned you, noob, like your mom's fat or whatever. And so it's so obviously like ridiculous that in theory you don't take it seriously. I mean, the little butthurt kids on here are like, oh god, he's so toxic. But like anyone a normal human being doesn't get offended by that. But in Europe, we don't really like trash talk. We just whine in such a manner that it grates on you and just breaks your soul. And eventually you're just like, I mean, you think of some of the people in Lemon Dogs, dude. It's not that they would just trash talk, they would just complain, right?
Yeah, well, it comes down to the same thing. They were just making fun of people all the time, basically. Like, that's how trash talk is sometimes. Like, it's not... it's hard to, like... The difference between, like, public and, like, behind the scenes trash talk is, like, really different, obviously, because what people put on in public is, like, okay, they put on their masks and they're like, oh, hey,
yeah, of course,
lol, you suck, lol. And, like, it's just a joke, don't get mad. And they just get, like, they poke fun at each other, but behind the scenes, like, people are gonna, like... They're gonna call each other out and stuff like that, but you're obviously not gonna do that in public because everyone will be like, oh, you flame my favorite player. Or
anyway,
like, well, how can you say that? Because you don't have any rights to say that.
Yeah.
Like,
so you're a professional. You've earned one shiny bronze coin for your trade. You will never be allowed to express an opinion. Yeah, I demand you maintain the consensus at all times.
Anyway, the slash dancing shit was just like ridiculous.
Yeah, that was like a ridiculous like divergence that I took us on there. But anyway, the original thing I was going through was if we went through the regions and we're picking out teams. So let's go to another region, Monty. Which team from Korea, of those three god tier teams who are all the best in the world, which team would Alliance have the best chance against? So we've got SKT, we've got Samsung White, and we've got Samsung Blue. Which one would be the best matchup for them come Worlds? He's deep in thought.
Probably Blue.
What's going to be great is now Blue is definitely going to go back to back and then go to Worlds, and then they're going to be like, Monty confirmed said Alliance would beat the Blue.
I did not say that.
I know, I'm just doing the
best.
The
okay,
Twitch
guys,
chat version.
The best.
We're the chosen ones.
Like the 10% chance of win versus the 5% chance of win. Technically, 10% is the best. You know, I'm pressed to say something.
Why do you pick them then?
I think that this is just my prediction for going into the playoffs. I do think that we're going to have a White Arrows finals, but I think that Blue in the current meta is waning. I think that we talked about this earlier in terms of why teams were successful earlier on in this season was because they were able to get like level advantages on their top laners, and then they're just kind of through intelligent macro play and good rotations, they were able to create like level advantages without fighting at all. And blue was the best at this, right? They were the best. The blue was the team that at least CLG was looking to kind of understand this situation a lot better because they were so far ahead of the curve. And so now that we're switching into a more static-based style of play, I think we're going to see Acorn kind of return to his old kind of more normal, like middle-of-the-pack KDA. And that, generally speaking, I feel like Samsung White and SKTK are better in a 2v2, 1v1 scenario.
Tabzz is just drinking his muscle milk. Get strong.
Yep.
So the topic now will be North America. That part above South America, below whatever the fuck, the Arctic or something. I don't know. I'm kind of losing it here in my geography. So there was some minor news in North America. Let me find my list here. I had like a note somewhere, just something to talk about for like a half a second or something. Like apparently one of the really low level teams over there like just changed a player. No big deal. So this team called TSM, I don't know how you pronounce that. They actually changed a young fella called Gleeb. I'm glad he actually changed his name to that because I used to just like make up the second half of his name whenever I started. It was sort of like trying to spell Mississippi. I just kept going too much sometimes. So his name was Gleeb. And he's actually been replaced with Lustboy. But wait, you say, travel back in time with me 2 months. Well, that's just incorrect. Lustboy would never be added to TSM. You're speculating. You're biased against TSM. I don't know where you've gotten this information. Travel back forwards again. Now we're here again. Like I said, Lustboy has replaced Gleeb in TSM. Something that would never happen, right, Monty? That would never happen.
No, I mean, I think that teams have to make the roster changes that make sense. And yes, maybe at the time, I mean, if we look back historically, obviously TSM had a lot of confidence in terms of Gleeb's performance, and they thought clearly, both Reggie and Loco said that they believed that TSM was going to be good for Gleeb, that he would grow into his position, that it was going to be, and he would grow quickly, but it was still more of a long-term bet. But apparently something, I mean, from Loco Doco's vlog that he released, something wasn't working out in terms of personalities, in terms of Gleeb, and so it wasn't. You have to make the change, man. At the time, maybe they weren't thinking about having Lustboy, but now, apparently that change is very necessary, although it is coming at an extremely late date with only 2 weeks left in the regular season.
When this move was made, okay, the reason people are thinking this is going to be like drama, etc., is because obviously we were one of the first people when the news happened that Glee was joining in the first place to criticize the move. But people have to understand the context of why we criticized it is because it's not like it was just, okay, this Gleeb guy has been added. That's one topic. Should the Gleeb guy have been added, like the Gleeb guy, should Gleeb have been added to TSM? That's one thing you can debate. Then you have to, because of the circumstances, debate, well, is he better than X-Special? Will he be better than X-Special in TSM? Like, these are other questions that follow, but are separate in their own right. Okay, so on its own rights, we initially brought up the idea of like, well, what has this guy done that he should be in TSM? A team that in theory is going for the title, okay? They're going for the best team in NA. From seeing his performance over the split, that question alone, was he good enough to be in TSM? Should he have been the support? Ignoring the special factor, just the Gleeb's performance alone, what marks would you give him for the split, Monty?
I say he's incredibly inconsistent, and he has very few champions that he is LCS caliber on, which is, and also we don't know to this day what effect losing X-Special had on TSM's shot calling, but TSM's shot calling has been pretty underwhelming, I would say.
So
okay, and first off, Twitch chat and Twitter. You see this? This is the mic that I'm using. It's not this. I know this mic is here. This giant ass microphone so that you can hear all the subtleties to my beautiful voice. But thank you for your help.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, anyway, so actually, Tabzz, did you ever watch TSM play this split?
Barely.
You're a guy who, listen, I described before, you're a European, you're a whiner, you're a flamer, you're part of Lemon Dogs. You're so far one of the only fluent Lemon Dogs not to be on the Riot death note and have actually survived and you still have a career and you're doing success, you know? So I get the sense that if Tabzz plays with a support who's a tall subpar in any sense, that support is going to fucking know. So what did Tabzz think of Gleeb the times he saw him?
I didn't even watch his laning phase at all, so it's like impossible actually for me to give a good opinion. Like I would have to play with the guy to know how good he is.
Okay, well then let's just go on straight into the second question that I'm going to ask everyone, which is, you must have known about Xpecial, right? You even got to play against him. What did you think of Xpecial as a support player?
He didn't really impress me much from the little I played against him at Worlds. Wasn't I don't know. And from what I've seen him play, I've seen him do some good things, but he was not like the best support in the world or something.
Okay, wait a minute.
He was a playmaker. He was pretty good. But
okay. That is interesting in itself, because you remember the hype from Worlds was that like, oh, TSM's bot lane just wrecked everyone and they did well against everyone. They were amazing. Even in scrims they were wrecking everyone. And Xpecial did an interview. He suggested that everyone, even they played in scrims, they were doing well. Why don't you hold that opinion?
I think their bot lane was pretty bad at that time, at least. Or, well, at least they played really passive for the lane matchup they had at that point. That's what I can remember. Like, me and Mithy were really surprised, because we had a lane matchup that should have lost. And we didn't even have much jungle pressure or anything, and we still won it by quite a big margin. Nice. And that shouldn't have happened. Like,
I knew Tabzz was... The universe gave us this episode, Monty, because Tabzz was secretly primed to be the third BM against TSM guy to come on the show. We've got someone here, okay? No, this is good. That's a good description of things. So, Monty, I'm guessing your opinion is the same as before. You thought before, like, listen, ignoring personal stuff, which here's a key... Okay, let me set it up like this, Monty. When people say stuff like, yeah, but you don't know what the situation's like in TSM, maybe it's really bad attitude. Yeah, you don't either, fictional guy idiot who's telling me that. So since you don't know, why would you speculate on something you don't know about? You can speculate, but that's what we're doing, so don't blame us. So since we don't have that information, we discount it, and we just look at what we do know, which is how does Xpecial play in the server, which is all we can judge on. And if there wasn't some sort of media blackout, whatever you call it, we'd be able to actually ask people, like we ask Crumbs, like we ask Monty, what actually does go on in the team. Then we can maybe get those answers. But that would be a dream world in which we can't live, obviously. So anyway, I get the sense that just in the server, Monty thought before, listen, Xpecial is one of the best supports ever from NA. He's much better than this player. This player would have to do a lot to overcome him, and I'm guessing you're going to say now that he didn't overcome him, right? Xpecial's still better than Glee.
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
do you buy that story about... Okay, here's a good... Okay, did you have a point there, by the way? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I just think that pretty much in every dimension, like especially as Curse has been surging late, Xpecial's mechanics still appear to be on point. And if we look at the champions that Gleeb is good on, notably, or proficient on, notably Thresh, maybe Nami, but like I still think Xpecial's Thresh is far more game changing than Gleeb's is. Like Xpecial can make game winning plays with Thresh. So,
well, here's the thing. Okay, yeah, you have something, Tabzz. Okay, come on, jump in, boy.
So what I don't get is, okay, so first off they bench Xpecial for Gleeb, and then like they bring in Loco as well. So why wouldn't you keep Xpecial, who is obviously like the better player, and then like have him modeled into like the kind of attitude you want him to have by having a great coach?
Yeah. Or
that could help him.
Or you bring Gleeb in, and you stick with him for the entirety of a season because you believe in his long-term potential to grow into the role. And as you bring a coach in, a coach that has gone on record himself touting his abilities to form support players, why do you bench a player only a few weeks after this coach who allegedly has worked with some of the best, not even allegedly, who has worked with some of the best support players in the world?
Because they've made a mistake.
Well, clearly. So that's what they believe at the very least.
That's one of the interesting things about the way this is played out. It's that it puts them in a situation where something has to be said one way or the other, okay? The two possible outcomes of Gleeb being removed this late in the split and of, well, just of him being removed is that either they've decided Gleeb can't be good enough. Like, with him, we can't win. We have to take this gamble now. Or you're essentially admitting that Loco, his coaching alone, can't use the pieces they have there and get them to win. So it's either an indictment of Gleeb's level or Loco's coaching. As far as I can see, I can't see any other way you can interpret it, Monty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have to say that. And, I mean, sure, I think that sometimes, you know, and fans, I don't think it's fair to say about Loco or Reggie, well, they said this about Gleeb and they were wrong, so we're going to shit all over them. Sometimes you're wrong, and you have to make that adjustment in your roster. And I'm not saying TSM is wrong to be doing what it is doing now. I think that they're legitimately doing what is best, what they believe is best for them to make Worlds. But making this change with a player that, you know, the support position is a more naturally shot-calling position. You have to worry about the synergy with your AD care, a language barrier, even though Lustboy's English is very good. And Lustboy's attitude is very good, too. He's a great guy. He really is. And he also already has a good relationship with Loco Doco. So with all these factors, you know, I can understand maybe why they would make this change. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's fair to kind of call out, oh, you were wrong. Well, yeah, of course, they were wrong, and now they're making a change because they thought they were wrong. But ultimately, it does come down to one of those two factors. Either, well, there's a third factor, too. Gleeb is just unsalvageable in terms of attitude. Like, there is no force that can make him coachable. He could be uncoachable for all we know.
No, I would reiterate that as well. That's a key point I want to make. Even though I joked on Twitter, I don't think that this is like, oh, since you were wrong on one thing ever, you're an idiot and you know nothing and let's just go super hard on that. No, you can make predictions and decide something and not be correct. Like, what is interesting to me about the whole situation is that when I look at Gleeb, I don't see what was making them in the first place think he was going to be super good. I don't think he's been super terrible. I think he's been what I expected him to be. He's similar level. Yep. Maybe he got a bit more comfortable like 4 weeks in and he had a little bit of a better run. But overall, he was never going to be some super world beater. He was never going to be total trash. He was okay. But as a result, that's also, by the way, why I don't actually have no animosity to Gleeb at all. I don't even know the guy. If in his case, he's perfectly doing it within his rights to take that job. If someone offers you a really good job, you take it. The people you criticize are the ones who put you in position like that. Well, that's why we're criticizing TSM, because think of it this way. The reason why Reginald and Loco are open to some criticism is because if this guy really was what he always was, and he hasn't transformed into something magical, and whatever they were seeing wasn't there, then actually they do take some blame for putting someone in a position where they couldn't succeed. You expected of someone what they could not do, and then you're essentially, not directly, but by removing them, you're sort of blaming them, like, oh, well, you couldn't do what I wanted you to do. Well, how was he expected to?
That was a TSM decision. I mean, Loco wasn't part of the team, I believe, when that decision was made. So Loco was given the pieces. No. So as a coach, from my perspective, from somebody who came into a team in the middle of a season, which I did with CLG, sometimes you're not happy with all the parts that you have, and changes are necessary. And I certainly found myself in that situation when I first joined CLG, and it was only until later that I was able to be more influential in terms of roster changes that I should be held responsible.
The way Loco implicated himself wasn't even from joining TSM as the coach. It was that he said on our show these comments about, you know, Gleeb has all this potential. I've seen him in Cloud9 Tempest or whatever it was, and he's going to be a top 3 support by the end of the split and all this sort of thing. Listen, to use the same analogy, Monty, when you came into CLG, you didn't say, listen, I've joined CLG now, I'm the coach. Nien is going to be a top 2 top laner by the end of the split. We're going to win Worlds. Like, you didn't make crazy predictions. So obviously he opened himself to a bit of criticism or jibing when he did that. Okay, that's why we're kind of bringing it up now. But I have an interesting point to make here, because obviously this is somewhere where Tabzz can jump in as well in terms of like team chemistry and what actually goes on behind the scenes. One of the reasons given to us as to why they had to remove Xpecial over and over was like, oh, apparently he's got really bad chemistry, or he's got some sort of attitude problem or something like that. If you saw Loco's vlog, he essentially says the same thing about Gleeb. He essentially suggests that there was some sort of synergy problem or some sort of personality problem, or someone wasn't able to contribute in some way. And it's implied that Gleeb, clearly, since this is the change they've made, was directly in the mix of this. So it's not even as though you fixed that by having Gleeb into the team. What do you think on that in general, Tabzz? Is there, if people in the server are good, like say Xpecial in the server, we know he was good in TSM. At what point behind the scenes do things have to be really bad, or in what way that you'd remove them and gamble on someone who hasn't as proven, you know? Because I can understand sometimes it must happen, you know. What's your take on that?
Well, if their mindset is like obviously so negative or impacts the practice in such a way that your practice is like essentially nullified, or like it's in your team spirit is going down a lot, then that person is, even if they are a good player, obviously they are not being good for the team as a whole, even if they are good individually, because they make the team as a whole perform less because they get on other people's nerves, and the practice they have is subpar because there is like a lot of whining or stuff like that. But that's like shouldn't really happen, in my opinion, unless like you're already losing everything. Like, I think that kind of personality only really gets brought out when you're already like doing really badly with the team. Like, you're not like a special is not suddenly gonna be like, fuck you guys for winning, but I hate all of you and all of you can fucking leave this team. This is my team, bitches. And no, it's not gonna be like that. It's like, there has to be something really negative already going on in the team, like they're losing everything, or there's already internal conflict for this to even be an option.
Well, the weird thing about this whole situation to me is that we heard about Gleeb's very positive attitude, and everything that Gleeb releases to the public, including his newest Facebook post, has been overwhelmingly positive, and we heard about his good attitude, and one of the things that was cited about Gleeb was his fantastic work ethic. So maybe there is, you know, of course, there could be stuff going on behind the scenes here in terms of attitude that we don't know about. But from what I know of Gleeb and the interactions that I've had with him over social media and the statements that he's put out, and even other people who are inside the team's assessment of his personality, it seems odd. It seems odd. There's obviously something going on that we are in the dark about. But the other thing I want to bring up too is with TSM, I think the most likely reason that they felt they had to make such a drastic change, because yes, this could pay off huge for them. We can talk about Lustboy in a minute. He's not certainly the best support in Korea by any means, but he is a mid-tier Korean support. And I think that in the long term, he could be a very good pickup for TSM, and he's obviously very motivated to come and play in NA, and he really is an awesome guy. But I think the biggest highlight here is that TSM's win record against the top teams has still not improved. They're 3-9, 25% win rate. They're heading into the playoffs. They have a month to prepare. They have a month to practice with Lustboy. So
and just to add a caveat to that, that's not what people are going to say. Yeah, well, 3-9, but that's the beginning of the split. No, they're 1-3 in their last 4. They're still 25% even in the last 4.
Not improved at all.
That's the current form here. That's not some biased stat. That's just fucking reality and how arithmetic works. Continue. Yeah,
they have not improved against the top teams. They continue to be beaten by them. They continue to be consistent against the bottom teams. At 25% of the time, they pick up a win against the top team. But that is not a reliable way to win going into playoffs. And I think that desperation has caused this gamble. Could it pay off? Absolutely. It really could. But that's, I think, the biggest reason why they're taking this risk, if I had to get into their heads.
So here's the thing, Monty. I've got a good point for you here. One of the reasons why I said of the outcomes, okay, we've addressed the topic, was Gleeb not good enough, which is an obvious thing you would conclude from them removing him. But the other way you could go with it if you remove him is Loco Doco's coaching good enough? And the reason why I ask that is this. Think about it this way. When Tabzz was describing before the circumstances, okay, even if you have this really good player, but he is so bad behind the scenes that for whatever reason, he's just ruining the actual game itself. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you even think to yourself, okay, even if it's a player I know isn't as good, I'd rather have a positive attitude, and I'd rather have by taking away the negative presence, maybe we actually get better as a team because we get more out of our games, more out of our practice, something like that could actually shift. So even though you've got a worse player on paper, you have a better team overall. Now here's the key thing. Me and Monty have actually discussed this topic so many times because people are going to think that since I like Expression, I think he's a good player, that I think under all circumstances he should have stayed. Definitely not. If it's true he really was toxic or some problem, then I actually agree with removing him, because I've always said, if you're a coach, the one thing you want is stability. You want variables that are always the same. Therefore, you understand things like what your win conditions are, what you're practicing, what your weaknesses are. Whereas when you have that really talented guy, for me, it's the other way. I don't think what's the worst thing that he has to do before I kick him. I'm thinking the other way. Is this guy really so talented that I have to keep him, even with all these other problems that he's going to ruin the rest of my team with? So actually, I'm totally in favor of that. But it then brings up this problem. With the tool set that TSM had, they would have told us a week ago, no, we still have the tool set where with our coach, Loco, we could win LCS. We could finish top 3. Well, now this move makes it sound like they didn't believe that themselves. Because at the end of the day, as bad as anyone can say Gleeb's been, I think he's been average. As bad as he's been in the context of not having it special, if Loco was really a great coach, I think you should be able to make the small changes that can get you up that hump to be able to finish top 3. That's the big gamble to me. It's not bringing in Lustboy. Is Lustboy good? It's why aren't you willing to? Why aren't you? Why is the system not trustworthy in TSM? That's what I want to know.
If there is no way you would make this change if you were reasonably confident that you could make top 3, because it's too big of a risk. And I do think there's a lot of upside to bringing in Lustboy. He is an insane League of Legends veteran. He played in 7 seasons of Champions. He's a Champions winner. There's so much good stuff about Lustboy. There really, really is. And it's not really about Lustboy. It's about making a change this late in the season and the potential ramifications. I mean, this is a really all-in move.
I mean, the thing is, here's the funny thing, Monty. I understand why you would say, for example, like, okay, it's a big risk to bring in this Korean guy, and you're gonna have the language issues, and now you've changed your lineup, and now your coaching things these are all really good factors. But I maybe people will be surprised. I think this is a good move. The reason why I think it's a good move is because I've said this on past shows. When we were breaking down who will qualify for Worlds, I would have bet money out of all the top 5 that TSM would be the one who definitely would not qualify for Worlds. And my reasoning was, think of the other 4 teams, LMQ, CLG, Cloud9 and Dig. I think in a best of 5, all of them beat TSM. So if all of the people that you're actually competing with for the spots will beat you, then actually at that point, unless you have some miracle coaching where you completely turn everything around, you probably should do a roster move. Whether this is the right roster move is a different question, but on that principle alone, there's some logic there, right, Monty?
Yeah, and I think that there's no coaching that could... I don't think this is an indictment of Loco Doco's coaching. This is the first time he's coached. I mean, how can we be very critical of him with no coaching experience and coming in for 3 to 4 weeks? And for what I understand, what Tabzz was saying is that he really helped out Alliance, and that he has a knack for it, and he has some talent at it, and he is able to help teams. But that's still, I think that attitude issues with players are something that, number one, it really helps to be older and more mature in order to deal with and have the weight of life experience behind you in a way. And also, it just takes a lot of time being a coach. And I can tell you, I've been coaching for a year now, and I still struggle with that, even though I am older, have had more life experience, and have more coaching experience. It's hard. It's very hard to deal with player attitudes and make them into a team that really works. So, Tabzz, I mean, obviously you think Loco was good. I'm sure he's doing good things with TSM, but I think that no coach in that situation could really ultimately succeed.
Well, I mean, there's an old saying about a bad workman blaming his tools, but that aside, I actually agree with that also, by the way. You can't expect a coach to turn things around in a miracle way. Like, I actually think he didn't have the tools. That's what I've just said. No matter what he'd have done, I can't see how he would have... Listen, think of it this way. Even if he'd figured out some genius way to beat, let's say, Dignitas. Okay, well, you still have to beat, like, one of LMQ, Cloud9, and CLG. You're still no further to... Well, you are closer, but you're still not going to qualify for Worlds. If you... I've got another point here, okay? Let me see. I had one written down. Okay, so let's actually talk about Lustboy being added. Oh, no, actually, before we go to Lustboy, Monty... I had one last question. Did you see that funny tweet that Xpecial made where he said something along the lines of to Gleeb? He was like, hey, Gleeb, if you want to talk, I know about that, man. Like, hit me up. that is genius because, first of all, by the way, Xpecial is one of the most fucking annoying people to ever hear talk in your life. It's like fucking a fly on it. It's like, get the fuck off him. It's so annoying. Like that drone that he goes into, and like it's almost like he hypnotizes himself. Like words are coming out, and then his vlogs are just fucking torture. I don't think anyone, not even Malcolm and Clockwork Orange, could sit through one of those motherfuckers. Like he'd go mental after that. So anyway, let's just imagine, Monty, that Gleeb hits up Xpecial. So what I want to do is we're going to role play this. You're going to be Gleeb, and I'm going to be Xpecial. Okay. Like, just, you messaged me, like, just message me how you're going to.
I can't do this, Thorin.
Look at what a spoil sport this fuck is. Okay, right. Well, let's fuck the humor, all the entertainment factor.
I'm sorry I'm a buzzkill for you.
Okay, Sir Buzz Killington, you cunt, right? Okay, so if we go on to Lustboy. Tabzz, you've watched Korean LoL. I've watched every fucking game Blaze have ever played in their careers. You know that trend that happens? The second someone who has a Korean passport sets foot, it happens with Europeans as well. The second he sets foot at, like, let's just say Ellis Island for the analogy, he magically becomes like 7 times better. Like, suddenly he was the best jungler in Europe, he was the best jungler in Korea, he was the best support in Korea. Like, they get way overhyped from where they were before in their old region, right? If you think of the old Lustboy, how good was he, do you think, in, like, the latter days?
I was saying he would be top, I think, but it's really hard to compare because, like, bringing it back, if you play against Koreans, I think their main strength is how good they are as a team. So if you take one of them and put him in your team, it's not like he's magically gonna be super good at the game and he's gonna be a massive force in your team. I think individually Koreans are good, but they're definitely not unbeatable, and I think what makes them strong is what they have behind them, which is their team, their organization, and their mindset, which as a single player going across the ocean, like, alright, that won't help you that much. Like, that's why I think in general it's pretty overhyped. Then it's hard to compare.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there was a time when Koreans could just win a versus Western team versus with mechanical outplays, but I think that time has kind of passed for the most part in terms of single-handedly winning games. And now it is about the work ethic, mindset, attitude, dedication, and teamwork.
Monty, I'm not going to sit by while people tell me that Lustboy was an elite Korean support. Now.
He was never.
Now.
Well,
He's definitely not now. Here's the reason why. Because if he was, again, that whole criticism that people have ablaze doesn't work. Because if he was an elite level support, and Emperor's this great AD carry that everyone hypes and says could be top 4 and could be really good one day, well, why wasn't their bot lane really good? It wasn't. It was okay, and at times it could be good.
Yeah, at times it could be good.
It doesn't work out.
The thing with Lustboy, too, that when we talked about this last time, when we had a conversation about the possibility of Lustboy going to TSM, a concern that I would have is that Lustboy plays Lustboy's style. He is not a very adaptable support player. Hence why Captain Jack and he had so many problems in the laning phase. Neither of those players was very adaptable, right? But as a support, he just hasn't really been able to conform to a different playstyle. And I also said that I think that Turtle and Emperor are much more similar in playstyle than Captain Jack and Wild Turtle. But that would be another concern that I would have with Lustboy.
I actually even have an insane point for you, Monty, that no one will have thought of that is genius for the context of Loco, Doco, Lustboy, and TSM. Think of this. You remember when we had Loco Doco on the show, the first episode, episode 7, check out your VODs, all good YouTubes near you. Episode 7, we had Loco Doco on, and he started spitting all this mad shit about Flame and how selfish he is, and how he does this, that, and the other, and he's the problem behind Blaze, and he's stubborn, and all this. And then on episode 10, Loco looked a bit more sheepish. He said, like, you know, I spoke to Flame, he kind of explained things to me, and I kind of realized, like, maybe I was being a bit biased towards Lustboy, and he also from their point of view. Think about this genius concept, Monty. Remember why X Special had to be kicked out of TSM? It wasn't because of his performance, he was really good in game. It's because he had like a negative attitude and he wasn't like working well with the team. That means Loco has just recruited someone he knows from personal experience talks shit about their teammates while active in the team to people not in the team, including what their problems are, what they're doing, what they don't like, and doesn't necessarily say it to their faces, by the way. Like, I actually have a Flame interview coming out soon where Flame knew the second he heard that from Loco, like, oh, that's Lustboy and Helios who've told him that. That is like an insane piece of context right there, Monty.
It is an actual concern. So I don't know. That is a good point that you bring up, I think.
Also, one of the main criticisms we had when Gleeb was added was, okay, when Reginald leaves the team, it seemed like X Special was the natural shoe-in to take some of the shot-calling role. And he was the player who engaged all the time. And you had these different factors that were going for him that Gleeb couldn't necessarily fulfill. How is Lustboy going to do either of those things? He's not going to engage, and he's not going to be the shot caller, that's for sure.
Well, and if he is the shot caller, we can say just objectively from Blaze's playstyle that Blaze doesn't have the best shot calling in the world. That's not really their strength as a team, and it never has been. For all of the seasons that Lustboy has been on that team.
They're not a decisive end-the-game fast team. They're a team who just farm up, they get to the end of the game, and then they just try and win. Oh, there's a guy on my left here that reminds me a bit of it. Okay, so... like, actually, what do you think, Tabzz, of the idea of a desperation move? Like, if a team, let's say in Europe,
let's say with you guys, how would you feel about this situation? So we're obviously NIF is not underperforming in any capacity whatsoever. You guys are still on top of the season. You guys are still favorites for top 2, if not the whole damn season of the EU LCS. And we have, you know, anticipation. I'm really looking forward to seeing if you guys make it to Worlds, how you do. Like, I'm really excited to watch Alliance. But in an alternate universe, maybe Alliance last season, okay, where you're kind of like middle of the pack, maybe you don't have a lot of confidence, and you have this opportunity to get a Korean player on your team to play with you as your support. You got 2 weeks left. Except Worlds is on the horizon this time. You don't have another, another split to get your shit together.
Yeah, it's like just a desperation move, really. Like, if you really want to go to Worlds and you're prepared to make a roster swap for it, you're willing to take the risk if you feel like that player that you're going to replace is like, it's gonna be so much of an issue. Like, you're like, oh, he's gonna fucking throw the game, like, or he's not gonna pull his weight in the playoffs where it matters. Like, we're not gonna qualify the Worlds, we're not gonna do good even if we get there. Like, then it's a legitimate concern, and I feel like a roster swap is a good answer. Like, and I do like that TSM is like changing their roster.
I mean, here's what it would take for me to change a roster with 2 weeks left in the split. I can actually quantify this. Underperforming player, horrible attitude, as in actively disruptive to the mentality of other players, low amounts of communication. It would take all 3 of these things. 2 of them would not even be enough to do it for me to take that risk.
Yeah, but also, like, a roster swap can create this kind of energy level in the team. So like, it can actually help a lot if you get rid of a certain player or something, or you bring in someone new to the team, you get new blood, and sometimes that can actually create some very positive influence on the team you have. Like, let's take for example like Lemon Dogs. Okay, because I was in there and we did a roster swap. So we changed, we were like 4-6 in the standings, we were like bottom, like maybe middle. And we're like Will Failure is not doing too well. Like, we do kind of want to go to Worlds, and I think we would be a lot better off if we kicked him. And then we got Mithy. He was a lot better. Like, he wasn't a problem anymore. We got rid of our problem, and suddenly we started winning everything. And we got first in the regular season, second in the playoffs, we went to Worlds. I can see like how that kind of positive influence from a roster swap can actually grant like an immediate good effect on the team's performance.
That's fair.
And if they are gambling, like, I don't know what the odds are of that happening. It might be 70-30, it might be 50-50, you know, but at this point, they know for sure that they are not going to make Worlds if they don't do it. So instead of having only a loss-loss situation, they're like, might as well take this chance and like roll the dice and hope we win.
Yeah, fair enough. It is hard to argue with that, especially, like I said, because they have the time to build they have a month before playoffs. So they have a lot of time. Well, 3 weeks if they don't make top 2. And to me, what they're doing is potentially throwing away their last 2 weeks in order to like try and make a run, be like ending up, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th.
I don't even think that's necessarily bad though, because like I say, not only but even here's an even stranger factor for you. It would be really bad if you did a move like that if you were like Cloud9, okay? Say you took the gamble now, and say Cloud9 was worried, like maybe we won't get top 3, maybe we could lose to Dignitas or LMQ or someone, and they took the move. It would be worse for their team because their team's strength is like really good decision making, rotating, closing games out, coming back into games. TSM's whole game, if you went and read some of the stats analysis that have been done recently, was just farm like monsters, beat really bad teams who can't keep up with us, and we just kill. And then, well, I don't know what the strategy against the top teams is because we almost never saw it. They just lost. So actually, that's one of the few teams you could afford to just take some ridiculous gamble and get a guy who maybe won't even have good communication, just on the hopes that he, at least his position could play a bit better. That's not actually such a bad gamble. It is in the sense that, like, there's a lot of factors we've mentioned here, but it's not a crazy gamble. It's worth a try. Yeah. I have a question for you then about the idea of bringing in foreigners, though. By the way, anyone who ever reads my Twitter, don't just read like one tweet. If you go back before, you'll see that like there's no point painting me as someone who thinks that like North America should be only full of North Americans. Like, that's not even vaguely what I think. I think like anyone should be allowed to move for any region if they're good enough and a team wants them. I'm egalitarian. I don't give a fuck if 0 Americans play this game as long as good people play it.
I agree.
See what I did there? But it is funny that TSM, who is like America's team, who's the one that had all the fans and they've always been supported for so long, 3 of their last 4 moves have been for foreign players who weren't from North America. and now they're bringing in this Korean guy, and now they've got a team where you've only got 2 players from North America. I mean, aside from the obvious joke of saying something like that, Bill O'Reilly will now be calling for harsher border control at the porch to TSM's house. You know, there must be surveillance, and people must show their papers, and that they've come here to work for a legitimate reason. They're not just trying to claim that easy income from streaming and TSM exposure. Like, jokes aside, what do you think of the fact that TSM in particular has embraced the trend of foreigners coming in all the time? Because, I mean, CLG have done it in the past anyway, but what do you think of the idea that TSM's like spearheaded? Like, it looks like now they don't even look to NA. After the Gleeb experiment failed, they're not even looking to NA for replacements.
Well, I think that they were looking at the best available options for support, and there aren't a whole lot of options at this point in time, right? Who are you going to take? There aren't any available supports from NA or EU at this juncture that are as good as Lustboy is. So just based on the fact that the Korean season ended, Lustboy decided to leave Blaze, that you actually have an opportunity here to pick up a decent player.
So this also, by the way, just made me realize now Mithy has literally missed 2 chances to join TSM. Now because he's actually banned. No, that's my thing. Before he couldn't get in because of the shit he said. Now he can't get in when they desperately need someone, ideally who speaks English. Now because he's banned, because like it's sort of like that was the downward spiral he went on. First of all, like, you know, Lemon Dogs got kicked out, then Nip kept failing to get in, then he didn't get into TSM, and you know when people just eventually they hit the bottle, that's like the lowest they go. He was just like, well, the only pleasure I can get from life now is just to flame people in the game, so fuck it, bombs away, I'm going to do that. What could even happen to me at this point in time? And then someone's like, Miffy, you didn't flame yet, did you? Because TSM actually really needs someone who can speak it. Oh, sorry. We'll just bring in some Korean guy. And he's just like, oh no, I have sunk to the lowest level.
The Death Note never forgets.
No, it never does.
Poor Miffy.
Yeah, the Lemon Dog's Death Note. The organization's dead. The players are all dead. The only ones who survive is Dexter and Tabzz are the only ones left.
And one of them moved across the ocean to avoid it. It's like, I'm the only one left on the continent. You're
the only one who can still hack it in Europe. The only one who's at LCS quality level, you know. Actually, I always love that analogy. It's a good one where you say like injecting, you know, bringing flesh blood into the team. Because I always imagine it's like people get so sick of each other and the energy drags them down that like what happens is eventually like we gotta pick things up here. So they bring in this new guy, this new young guy, Gleeb. They're like, come on in, son, you wanna play for our team? And then all of a sudden everyone in TSM, little vampire things flash out and they run over and they all start feeding on them. And like Reggie's like, Bavarian stock, delicious. Like when Amazing came, like that's how they get reinvigorated. They steal their souls. So anyway, that was a total sidebar, obviously, where no one even has to come into the Thorin minefield. Going forwards from this, does this change anything, Monty? Like, do you see TSM? Is there a team that now they have a better chance of beating? Has this changed anything right now?
I have no idea. I mean, I think Lustboy's still going to be suffering from jet lag, and I mean, there's going to be a lot of factors this weekend. So, I mean, I'm excited to play them, but until I actually get eyes on them, I have no idea how this is going to take effect. I anticipate that they're going to be worse this weekend and Super Week, but probably better for the playoffs.
Okay, so let's actually talk about other things in NA, except that.
No, I want to finish this conversation.
Okay, what do you have to say?
With what happened with Loco Doka's vlog this morning, because I'm actually quite frustrated about that entire
Are you vexed,
situation.
Monty? Is this terribly vexing?
It is. It's incredibly vexing because we had a little bit of an exchange.
Okay, Doctorate Special's in the office again, so lay back, Monty, and tell me what's bothering you. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. Listen, I've got vlogs all day.
Okay. TSM releases a vlog publicly.
Okay.
Members of TSM tweet this vlog that is talking about Gleeb's removal.
Hey, listen, they might have just tripped over and accidentally recorded.
Like hit the enter button.
Yeah, I know. They
accidentally recorded, and then like Dyrus accidentally hit his enter key on Twitter, like with a link to the vlog. Okay, whatever. Okay, then this vlog is removed, and Travis Gafford decides somebody else put up a mirror of it, and he decides to tweet out a link to the mirror. Did Travis do this? No. Okay. So then Loco Doco gets mad that Travis, as a journalist, a professional esports journalist, tweeted a link to the mirrored vlog. So let me put this in context for you. In professional sports, if a team releases or has a press conference that they host, that they record, and they put it up, and then they release information about the team, and then they decide to take it down, and somebody else recorded it. The journalists, or even didn't record it, somebody transcribed it. The journalists have every right to be like, this is what this team said. Here you go, everybody else. They now removed it. That's how journalism works. Sometimes people don't want their statements out there. And then, to bring up a counterpoint that would we approve of Summoning Insight being mirrored? Well, there's just a lot of factors at play here. First off, we're doing this for the views. He was doing it to release public information, which maybe, had TSM not blacklisted on gamers, they could have worked with Travis to provide a more public and professional statement. And also, like, let's think, for example, have there been some times in Summoning Insight's history when maybe it would have been better for us not to release the VOD?
Yeah, I wonder.
After a live show.
The key thing is, once it's already out,
we released it anyway. We released it anyway. You know what? Because we own that shit.
And by the way, another side thing is, if we were in the old world of pre-TSM Blackout, well, then we obviously would have just had Loco on this fucking episode, at least for a segment. And not only that, we would have still said the same points, which were all analysis of the game and the player, by the way. But we could have joked about it as well. It's not a serious issue. Like, people don't realize this because they're so dumb. They think that, like, fucking esports is like Twilight. Like, are you on Team Derek or Team Ferric? I don't even know the fucking names of the people in Twilight. That's how much I know about pop culture, but whatever. They think it's like you have to be on one team or the other and you hate the other team. No. My opinions on Loco didn't change one iota after the TSM shit. I still think Reginald's an idiot, but that has nothing to do with Loco. We
like Loco. Loco's a great guy, and all signs point to him being effective. Like, we have a guy here who's been coached by Loco who said he helped a lot. Okay, there's no ire towards Loco, but to accuse journalists of literally doing their job and then trying to spin it into something about releasing when the purposes of these things are entirely different. The purpose of Summoning Insight is a show that we do to get viewers. The purpose of Loco's vlog is to inform the community about a team decision that was made. Okay? So you can't even compare the two, because one we're doing for, literally for hits for on-gamers, for the success of an esports journalistic website. That's why the talk show is made. That's why all sports talk shows are made. And one is essentially a press release. And if you release this press release and you make it public and then you delete it, you're still responsible for it. So suck it up.
And also, come on, like, the original thing that we actually went off on about TSM for was the implication that, like, a show like this provides nothing to the community. Even if you don't like any of the opinions, if I've always said this about Monte on the show, this is my dynamic of how it works. Even if what I say is wrong, if that sparks Monte to say something that is right or interesting, it has value, even if what I said was wrong. Follow the chain of logic there. You wouldn't get to what Monte said if I didn't say the wrong thing. So likewise, even if you don't like the opinions, if they then cause discussion and someone who's a fan has their own opinion, or someone else says something, or there's even a response from the other party, that in itself is a contribution and is positive in itself. Okay, I think we're killing Tabzz here now. He's just like having to sit,
Tabzz.
not react crazily, but check his Skype boxes.
The final word on this is Travis was doing his job as an esports journalist, and like I would say, it doesn't matter like who does this, or if you're a professional esports journalist in any field, it's absolutely your right to link to statements that were made by the teams. And the reality of the situation is that if TSM didn't want this vlog released, or who knows what happened there, because honestly, the contents of the blog are not that bad. It's informative. I think there was a good explanation of the situation. So if somebody pulls this back, that is a failure of TSM's management to control their own PR. That's not a failure of Travis. That is bullshit.
Okay, let's actually talk about some other stuff in NA now. First topic, Monte, CLG. And by the way, I'm just going to bring this up right now. People always say, I don't know why. Well, I actually do. That's a lie. I do know why. Let me rephrase that whole sentence, because I said people there, and that's the wrong way to characterize this. TSM fans who are really salty about the fact that we accurately describe why TSM are quite bad compared to the other top teams, get mad that that every episode isn't like Monty strapped down and me right in his face like, how about Seraph now, eh? Seraph good, is he? Is he flame, is he? He's doing really well, is he? How about, did he see Seraph just die there, Monty? Monty, respond, apologise for Seraph dying there. Like, what? I don't know what they expect we're going to do here. First of all, when you have someone on a show, you're going to be a lot more polite about how you discuss it than if the person isn't on the show. Secondly, every time CLG throws a fucking game, I let Monty give us his description. He'll be like, well, we shouldn't have lost that game. You know, we could have played it out. And I'm like, Monty, you can't do that. Like, it's a habit when you lose like that. That doesn't count.
I agree with you. Every
time we're like this. So, again, we will now, as usual, accurately talk about CLG. So, Monty, CLG went 0-2 this week.
Yeah.
They lost an entire week. Thoughts?
We played really badly, and I honestly think that part of the problem was that I think that all of us, but also I dropped the ball, especially in terms of considering all possibilities in pick and ban phase. I feel that we got outpicked in both of our games, and that's, you know, partially my responsibility. And I think that we just made some really overly aggressive calls when we had an advantage in one game, and I think that Helios absolutely destroyed us in the EG game. That EG played a lot better than I've ever seen them play. So I think both teams, LMQ and EG, deserved their wins against us. We got outplayed, and we got outpicked as well. So it's just not a good week for us. But
the LMQ game, though, that's one where I have to put you on the spot here, Monty, because okay, even though I broached this topic before, the first time they played in the split, and a similar thing happened, okay? Big dragon fight, Ackerman makes an outplay, somehow the fight just goes to shit, and then LMQ wins a game that they were headed towards probably not winning, okay? When it happens once, when it happens once, you can say, okay, momentary lapse, we fucked up, like we knew what we were meant to do, but in the moment, you know, we got overheated, okay, whatever. If that happens a second time, now there's a trend starting to emerge here. Like in general, this is the main thing I always criticize you about CLG on, which is like, even if the players, if I sat them down privately, would say like, I could fill out a quiz, like, what should you do in this scenario? They'd go, well, I remember Monty said to do this. Okay, that makes sense. Like, or okay, Afromoo would call this and we'd do that. If you're not doing it in the game, that's a big concern, right?
Yeah, it is.
How do you overcome it?
Well, I wish I had the answer on that.
Hypothesize for me. What as a general concept, what would be the way to overcome that?
I mean, what I really want the players to do in the future is to play the game a little more slowly, a little more like Alliance. When they have an advantage, not to go for the big Hail Mary pass that has the big chance of the interception. I also really would like them to take a look at the game clock, because I think they get ahead of themselves in terms of doing Baron too early a lot of the time when it's too risky. And I think that we need to, because in scrims, here's the difference between scrims. In scrims, things are so chaotic a lot of the time. And I'm sure Tabzz can corroborate this. Sometimes you can get away with a 20-minute Baron in scrims. Actually, you can get away with it a lot. But it's very rare for you to be able to get away with a 20-minute Baron in the LCS. And I think that our scrims against LMQ lead us to believe certain things, and that we have to be more considerate of the game clock.
Tabzz, as a general principle, if a team is doing that, like listen, so if you look at the game CLG wins, what Monty's describing about how they should play works, right? They close games out. In fact, I've even got the stats. I did a show recently about a video where they're the best team in LCS NA from 10 minutes to 20 minutes. They close games out when they get an advantage. When they have an advantage, they press it, they win. But if you're a team where you are having these times where consciously you must know on some level, like, okay, in this position, we could safely close the game out. We could do an alliance. Instead, we take some really weird thing where even though we're in the league, we'll take a chaotic fight that we could lose the whole game on. In general, if a team does that, like, what is that like in general? Like, is there a way to get over that? Is that just an inherent flaw within how the chemistry of the team is? Now, will that weakness always be there, do you think?
No, I think that's actually something you can bring up by like reiterating why you how are you going to win the game in the game itself. And then once you realize, oh, I don't actually have to go for this Baron that can be stopped and then we lose the game. Like, I can actually play this out differently. And then once you realize, once you get your players to keep thinking during the game about what they have to do to win the game, then they would realize that they don't have to do that.
The most frustrating thing with the LMQ game in particular is that I feel that even though CLG made this apocalyptic error, we made a very large error. the rest of that game was actually played out from behind about as well as they could have. They got towers. They managed to, read Vasily and play out their win conditions. It's just unfortunate that it takes such a large deficit to kick them into the right mindset of playing a more measured approach. Because, we should have lost that game in less than 30 minutes, but it dragged out to 43 because they were able to team fight so well. They were able to wait. I think CLG's biggest problem right now is they're not patient enough to wait for that moment to strike like LMQ is. And I think Alliance is, as well, is that sometimes we jump the gun, and then when we're behind, then we can wait. We're good at playing from behind, which is silly because...
But then you have to wait because you have no
it's just a really shitty, it's like a really shitty situation. But yeah, that's definitely top of my list right now for working with CLG.
You've watched a few CLG games this season, right, Tabzz?
Sorry, what?
You've watched a few CLG games this season?
Maybe two. Maybe.
Did you ever watch any of Seraph's play?
Well, it usually wasn't looking good when I looked at the scoreboard, but I didn't look at the play himself. So I don't know how much that says, but
I don't know what they want us to do, Monty. But people always think that we never address the Seraph issue on this show. That we don't that he's doing badly, and we don't address that issue.
Well, I think the main factor for Seraph's play is that we do not play to Seraph's play style, and that we do not put enough jungle pressure up on the top side, and that's a flaw. I think Seraph's play is more of a flaw of the way that we play as a team rather than his individual skill.
So,
by the way,
do you think you can change him or not?
I think we need to. I think we need to change the rest of the team around Seraph. But communication is.
If you change Seraph, you will destroy his strength as a player.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then he will be really weak. That's no reason to bring him in.
Yeah,
so you want to change the team around to him.
At this point, Dr. Special would say, "Well, Seraph needs to want to change." With support of his friends and his family and a network.
The rest of the team needs to want to change.
Actually,
I think that when Seraph has played champions, I think the meta was going against Seraph, and obviously it was really hard to recruit a top laner at the beginning because we've talked about this before, but it was impossible to know. I mean, Tab said earlier that the meta has changed more this split than any other split ever. How were we supposed to know that this jungle follow, crazy teleport meta was about to show up, right? That was the situation before it wasn't the situation before we recruited.
I've got a good point to make here. So we've got 3 examples we can use. NA ADC, Gleeb and Seraph. These are all 3 people who were put into a really high pressure, high expectation system in a top level team, and who in their own ways at certain times in those careers didn't live up to the pressure and got criticism for it. What separates Seraph from 2 of those is that NA ADC and Gleeb had a very defined skill set and were going to just do the same. In fact, if anything, they were actually quite consistent in what they did. They just did the same things, and no one expected within the teams them to do something crazy and win the whole game, okay? And so when they did badly, okay, maybe you can blame the teams. Again, why put someone in a position where they can't necessarily do what you want them to do? In the Seraph case, I have a really good analogy for you. When Tabzz said there that actually you don't want to change Seraph's mentality because as a result you could destroy him as a player, I have a sports analogy for you. When Phil Jackson, the NBA coach, who at the time had won 6 NBA titles, joined the Los Angeles Lakers in the 2000 season, he inherited this team, right, which had a young player called Kobe Bryant on it. And this guy was very, very skilled, but he wasn't the best player on his team. The best player on his team was a guy called Shaquille O'Neal. And the problem in the team was that these 2 players didn't get along whatsoever, right? And so unfortunately, you had this established superstar and a growing superstar who don't get along. And not only that, because the brooding superstar doesn't get along, he doesn't really acknowledge fully that the main superstar is the main way the game should be played, should go through him, and you're a second banana and you have to play a role, okay? And so what happened was people thought, well, since this amazing world championship winning coach comes in, think about how coaches are in sports, Monty, in America. usually the image you get is the guy like a Bobby Knight guy who comes in and he says like, listen, you're going to fucking do this the way I say, and your job is to do this, and I'm the boss here. Listen, I'm telling you how to do it, and if you're second, then you give up all your rights to this guy. Phil Jackson actually made a really shrewd judgment call when this happened, right? Where he said, actually, even though I have problems with how this guy plays and he doesn't play within my system and I have to develop that, don't ever, he actually said this to an assistant coach, don't ever tell him not to be aggressive and play in that like slightly selfish way, because one day that will make him a great player when he's ready to be a great player. So if you like drilled that out of him now, because that's something you can't teach, wanting to be aggressive, wanting to carry and really believing you can do it, if you drill that out of a guy and you break him from that, you can never then turn the corner on that and go back to that. So this must apply to CLG now, right? There must be a future in which Seraph has to be able to carry sometimes.
Well, and we've seen him do, if we look at a lot of the matches, I agree he was underperforming in the first part of the split, but since then, if we look at the matches, he's had some very good games. I mean, the Cloud9 game where he got a lot of pressure up on the top side, he just crushed balls. And there are other games too, like against EG, where he was performing very well in those games. And I think during Super Week as well, he probably performed the best on average over the 4 games of Super Week out of anybody on the team. So I see an upward trend. I see a meta that is shifting in Seraph's favor into more carry-oriented top laners. And I see his English has gotten amazing. His communication with the team has improved vastly to the point where our in-game comms with Seraph are not even an issue anymore. It's 100% fine. There's nothing there's not a lot that I don't like about this situation, besides the fact that we as a team have to be better about adapting to his style.
Let me think. What else was there in NA that was good? I mean, we kind of addressed LMQ already. Okay, I'll ask Monty. Like, I sort of have a status update. Every time LMQ keeps winning and they keep getting the first spot and tied for first and first on their own, I always keep checking with Monty, like, do we believe in them yet, Monty? Do you really believe? This point, I think you have to have broken. At this point, LMQ have made you a believer, right?
That's what I pretty much said that earlier in the same show. Yeah, I agree.
Is there some key factor you can point to now that, like, I mean, I think before you said something like that. Okay, before we used to characterize them as kind of like okay, here's the way Thorin would say it. I could just say that they're very strong in one area, which is kind of brute force. But the Thorin way to say it is they had retard strength. They used to just go ham, and they used to be like Lenny from fucking Mice and Men. They used to just snapping little puppies' necks by hugging them to death. They used to just be wrecking people like brutes. But we thought they didn't have any intelligence behind them. It sounds like you were describing before. You've actually noticed something. Like sometimes they are patient. Sometimes they do.
They are patient.
They do wait in a way. Okay, that's something that you didn't notice before, though, right? That's developed. Do you think this season?
Yeah, it has developed, and I think that they're very good about reacting to things decisively, and I think that's their strength.
Does Dignitas was the first team actually where Monty changed. Okay, he originally thought they were going to drop off and they weren't going to be that good, but then eventually he bought in and he was like, no, this could be a top 3 team. This is in my top 3. Is Dignitas in trouble at the moment?
Maybe. I still think their bottom lane is a major concern and is a point of weakness for them. So I think people are also getting used. I think that, and the other thing too, the same criticism remains, is that Shifter and Zion aren't willing to fight enough or go all in enough when behind in order to actually create a comeback. So, and they do fall behind in their bot lane a lot.
What do you think of the bot lane of Dig? I think you vaguely touched on it before, right, Tabzz?
Yeah, I thought they were actually really horrible. Back when I played them at Bota, I was like, wow, these guys are pretty damn bad. And we even played with like Silly in support because it was a good customage. And I don't know, I can remember one time when they were just like chasing customage and trying to get the kill. Then I just came up a base with the BF sword as Lucian. And I just like killed their face and got a double kill. And I was like, well, alright, just give me like a free double kill. And I don't really get what you're doing. And they had like 0 pressure in the lane as well. They were playing really bad trading and mechanically back then. I have to admit, I haven't been following much since Bota, and that's a long damn time ago, but if you say they're still as they were back then I would say, yeah, they are not a very good bot lane.
I think they've improved a lot since then, but even so... Okay, Tabzz, I've got a question for you. Even now, people still make the claim that NA has the AD carries, okay? But I think every top AD carry in Europe thinks that actually EU has loads of really good AD carries, right?
They do, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's kind of changed around since especially since season 4 when we got to see a lot more EU talent. Like, I agree, in season 3 it was really lacking. In summer, okay, you had only Kraton pretty much, and I literally just converted from mid lane like 2 weeks before the qualifier, so I was pretty rookie to the role back then. And I only got good later in the split, so yeah, Kraton was really good, but there was like nobody else. And then season 4 comes, and then suddenly you have like talent entering, like Reckless turns 17, like Mr. Alles gets picked up by SHC, he was really good, and suddenly this guy from EU NE comes and he has really fucking good mechanics and is really strong in teamfights, and his name is Forgiven, and he's really fucking good too. And like all of a sudden you had like these 3 really good players entering the scene, and suddenly I wasn't like not nearly as good anymore. Like I was like went from like number 1 to like number 4 or something, even in the rankings of how good AD carries were.
Okay.
And yeah, the notch of like the level of EU AD carry since season 4 has gone up by a really big notch, I think.
So let me ask you this, Tabzz. Reckless had all that hype before Fnatic. Then in Fnatic, even when they were doing badly, he's the one guy who always used to get a lot of credit. People said, oh, he still plays great, his numbers are great, you know, he's really good even if everyone else is slumping. Now, Fnatic are returning to the top again. It seems like, short of becoming fucking Name, there's almost nothing Tabzz could do to ever exceed Reckless in the public mind. Even if Alliance was 20-1, Reckless will always be better than Tabzz. Reckless is the number 1 EU AD carry. He's comparable to Koreans. How do you see this topic, Tabzz?
Well, about me versus him, I think earlier in the split I was a lot better than him actually, because he was the kind of player that would never take any kind of aggressive approach to team fighting or just fighting in general, where I'm the kind of guy that would just jump in a lot of the time, and it worked really well. And he even admitted in private that he thought that I was better than him, and that he had a lot to learn. He had a lot to learn he had a lot to learn at the time, and like I agree at any time probably his mechanics are better than mine. Just straight up mechanically, he is better than me. I won't deny that. But I feel like I can make it up in other ways. Like I feel like my game knowledge is higher than his, and that will continue to be like that. And now that the like they say the meta is more in his favor as well, like his style of play and mine has kind of fizzled out, that you could say yeah, he's on a higher power level than me right now.
What does Monty think? And bearing in mind, Tabzz is in like the other fucking box on the screen, so it's awkward for me to ask this, but who is the best European AD carry for Monty's money?
Hold on, I'm having some issues with the call. I mean, we've talked. Okay, well then I'll just keep talking. I can make it out enough. Yeah, I think that there are some interesting issues, I suppose, that come into play with European AD carries, but I feel that generally the level has gone way up. I agree with Tabzz. We had some people changing positions. We've had some new blood into the scene, and EU ADs are generally good too. Candy Panda, recovered his form as well. So, yeah, I don't think there's that. We've had this talk on the show before. I don't really think there's that big of a difference. And EU has plenty of talented ADs.
If you had to put your factors, Tabzz, on what holds EU back from being like, listen, with NA they could complain about things like maybe our homegrown talent isn't good enough, and we have to get foreign players in. EU is it's 99, I think it might be 100% foreign players, EU players. In theory, we had this discussion on the show before with Monty, we actually think it was deeper than NA. So if the talent is there, if the teams are there, what holds EU back from being on the level of Korea, China, these bigger countries?
Well, 2 things. Like, first off, I don't think that the talent pool is there. I think in certain positions.
Okay, which positions isn't talent enough in EU?
I would say support and top are very lacking in Europe.
Okay.
It's very hard to find good players and talented players at those positions that aren't banned or quit already.
Okay.
Like, say, Mithy and Zoro were really good, but they both like are out of the scene now and stuff like that. And I think those 2 positions actually hold EU back quite a lot in terms of talent. And then second off, like, if you want to compete with Korea, you need just as good of an organization infrastructure as they do to compete with them if you want to win. That's how I firmly believe that, actually. I don't think that just as 5 individuals you can beat a Korean organization with massive preparation and 2 coaches and stuff like that. It will be really hard even if you have 5 good players. So those are the two things I would say that are holding back the region.
So support and top lane, for some reason, the positions we're weak at. Right.
Yep.
Why support? I mean, why? I think of supports. Looks at the supports we have now. Okay, Monty's rejoining. Yeah,
Before another remake.
So when I think of the supports we have in Europe, okay, Yellow Star, really good support, obviously. Nif, good support, very good pedigree and history as a support player. N-rated, okay, in game he's not a beast, but he has extra factors that he can bring in that make him a valuable player. Let's keep going. Edward, one time, was considered the best European support player in the past, at least.
Yeah, but he's not that great anymore, I feel.
Why do you think there's so few supports that are talented?
I just think there's very few who are especially like strong in lane, especially. Having played with Mithy at the time, he was very, very good in lane. Like, he knew exactly what to do, and I haven't really seen that in any other support player out of Europe so far at all, actually. Like, none of them have really played that kind of aggressive, controlling lane style. I mean, I think there's good supports outside of laning phase, but I think a lot of supports in laning phase, they don't really put in the same effort, or like they aren't really that good.
I think Monty is being DDoSed. Anyway, ignore that. So, are you still there, Monty?
I'm still here.
Okay, it's fine. I actually have a question for you. It's something I was talking to Monty about the other day. Here's a really weird pattern I've noticed, Tabzz. Most people would agree unanimously that the two best supports in the West are Yellow Star and Afromoo. And both of these players share some ridiculous trivia with each other. Both used to be AD carries. Both are considered like cerebral supports who do an element of shot calling, and both play with support AD carries now who are best known for like mechanical brilliance, not like really good decision making, all that sort of thing. Do you have any, as an AD carry, do you have any kind of theory as to why this would be, why these two guys are the best when they have that really weird three factors that all line up, you know?
Well, having played AD, you know what you want from a support. It's really hard to tell them, especially yourself, what you want them to do. But in your mind, you know what your AD needs, so you can be stronger in lane because you know how to position yourself accordingly. For the rest of the play, yeah, okay. I think it's quite random actually that they share those trivia. But for lane phase, I could understand it, that they came from the AD carry position and that they're suddenly strong supports. Just shows that they know much about the lane and how it's supposed to be played. But I think for the rest, support is something you have to learn. The Yellow Star in the start was actually really bad. He was alright in lane, but then after lane he just kept getting caught and didn't know how to put vision and stuff like that in the start of like actually it was summer season 3. He was actually quite bad at support back then. But I think that people like can grow a lot, especially in that direction. Any AD carry can pick up the role and do decent in lane, and once they learn how to play the map, then they will be actually really good supports.
Is there any reason why... Okay, does Yellow Star still live up to the hype of like he's by far the best European sport? Because here's the thing, okay, part of what made it so impressive that he was amazing at the Season 3 World Championship was he'd hardly had any time playing with Pushu. Pushu himself had never played at the top level, and Pushu isn't like a super skilled player. So the idea that you could change the support, then become really good, and then work really well in the lane, this was really impressive. But now, Yellow Star gets to play with Reckless, who's very good at laning, very good at farming, very good at playing safe. Is the hype still warranted? Is he by far the best European support?
I think so, yes. I believe that Yellow Star is by far the best EU support.
Okay, fair enough. I think we've pretty much talked about everything from Europe there. I don't have anything else. Oh, actually, I have a question I didn't ask, but just from before, so let's do this. Before, we all thought on this show every other episode, okay, well, Europe, that's the easy one to predict, you know. Alliance, Fnatic, and then, you know, SK will take the third spot because it's SK, you know. They can plan, they'll win series, they'll beat those other teams somehow. Even if Fnatic and Alliance seem like a lock for Worlds, is the third spot SK's spot? Or will they lose to Millennium? Will they lose to Super Hot Crew? Will Rockat return? What does Tabzz think?
No, I don't think SK will be third. With the way they're looking right now, and they're looking to just be on even more of a downward spiral, like I doubt they can pull it back together. Like I'll be happy if they prove me wrong, because I do think that they kind of deserve some of that success, because like they've been doing so good, and like they are just very good at preparing and being good at objectives and stuff like that. But yeah, that's like the glaring thing about their lineup in the start. Like, okay, they don't have much individual talent, especially in some of their lanes. Like, I don't think their mid laner is very strong individually, and like their top laner was okay, but he's not particularly talented either. And yeah, like, what are you gonna do with such a lineup when your game plan basically gets changed, like it's not viable anymore? You have to find another way to win, and maybe you don't have the tools to win like that, so it's gonna be really hard for them to snatch the third spot when other teams with more individual talent like Millennium can actually create those opportunities and actually get third. The same for SHC. They just both have better individual players, and that's what matters more right now than having like the perfect objective control and the perfect rotations. If you don't have those individual players, it's gonna be hard to even win against teams that do.
Do you agree, Monty? Because we've always said that was the thing that would keep Cloud9 and SK in relevance. You know, they could always win by knowing how to play the game, but we've always also said they don't have the stacked lineup. So
I think we're seeing more of that now. I think that SK is really weak in terms of their solo lanes, and that's going to be really hard for them, I think, to overcome, and that they may have run out of answers for some of these situations. I don't think that the objective control versus individual play is as dire as Tabzz is making it sound, but I do think that it has been swinging more towards individual play. I think that's definitely true. But that said, I don't think, now if we look at it, I don't think SK is going to be finishing probably in the top 3 unless they really turn it around.
I still believe, Monty. I think that the factor that we're not playing into here is that it will be best of 5 in the playoffs, and there'll be time between matches to plan. So I think that actually they can gain something that they're not going to have in the regular season now when they're playing super weeks and they're playing back-to-back games and all that. They can gain something from the gamesmanship aspect, right, of playing in the playoffs with smart players who have an idea of how to play and what to do.
Maybe. I think they're on the cusp right now.
I think you're overvaluing being able to prepare right now. Like, I don't think it's gonna matter that much. I think actually SK didn't prepare that much in this regular season for teams. They just had a playstyle that worked very well for them, and they played the same way against many teams, like all the time. It was just very effective for them, and they were good at it. They don't seem like the kind of team that would prepare like level 1s and strange hero picks like Wolves would, you know? They're just a team that beats people with strong objective control and rotations.
Go out on a limb for me, Tabzz. Imagine after all the good play they had the last split, that for some reason SK doesn't make it into the world spot, okay? So let's say they finish 4th. Now let's imagine after Worlds, Riot, for some reason, unban Incarnation. Do you think Incarnation just joins as the mid laner of SK for next year? Is that plausible? Am I way out of left field for that?
Yeah, if that's his best option, then he would go for that. But
do you think SK would do it though?
Yeah, they would.
Okay.
They would obviously do it. Like, it seems really obvious to me. Like, they have one of the better mid laners in EU, like one of the top 3 mid laners probably. They have him basically in their lineup, and he's still actively playing solo queue for many hours a day. You know, has like many accounts in Challenger. Like, why wouldn't they put him in the starting lineup if their goal is to win games?
Right, I have one last question before we let Tabzz go, and then me and Monty will talk about Korea. So since you've said SK isn't going to get the 3rd spot, which team gets the 3rd spot in Europe, Tabzz, and why?
I think it's a toss-up between Millennium and Super Hardcore.
No. I said which team gets it though. Even if it's a toss-up, which team do you favour? Which do you think? Which does your gut tell you, or do you have some theory like, oh, I think that'll mean that they'll get it? Which would you put your money down on?
Millennium, actually. I would say Millennium would make 3rd.
Why?
Because I feel they have like the kind of preparation to pull out weird shit without caring for it too much. Like in a best of 5, I think they can catch people off guard. So if it comes to playoffs between SHC and Millennium, say, battling for that spot, I think that Millennium will take it just because they can catch SHC off guard.
Okay, interesting stuff. Okay, thanks for coming on the show, Tabzz.
Thanks, Tabzz.
Oh yeah, no problem. Nice being here.
Okay, just hang up. Cheers.
Alright, see you guys.
Okay, we are live. There's only 2 boxes, and you know what that means? That means me and Monty talk about Korea, a region that apparently no Western pro player gives a fuck about, that they could even talk about. Like, you saw Tabzz there, he was like, I think I saw like 1.5 CLG games. I was watching one, but then Scooby-Doo came on, and I was like, fuck, Scooby-Doo! And then I had to go. But apparently none of them... What's funny is every interview, Monty, they all tell me they watch Korean LoL. Oh, I love Korean LoL, yeah, I watch it all the time. And so I'll ask them like, well, what do you think of insert name of best player at your position? I couldn't really comment. I mean, I think he was good, wasn't he? Like, well, what are you watching? The fuck are you watching right now? None of you even understand strategy anyway. What are you watching right now? Just fucking call. Maybe they're like those retard fans who are just like watching the fireworks show of LoL. Like, oh look, he put down Zyra's ultimate and they all got knocked up. That's amazing. Like, maybe they're all the ignorant fans, Monty, the pro players. What do you think?
I think Europe tends to watch a lot less Korean LoL than NA does. I know like most of the NA pros watch it very actively.
Okay, well,
by the way, the weirdest part about that is it's on in a much better time zone for Europe than
sure,
it is
yeah. You just have to get up at like 8 in the morning or something ridiculous.
I mean usually it's like at like 10 or something.
Yeah, I think it's 10. But you have to realize, Monty, for me, waking up at 10 is like for a normal person waking up at 4. Like, that's not going to happen. That's why I watch VODs, buddy. I'm not going to be waking up at 10 in the morning. Anyway, actually, one thing is, because of the way the guests lined up on the past episodes, we didn't actually talk at all, believe it or not, about the playoff matchups, and already 2 of them have been played. So let's just go into this, Monty. KT Arrows was playing Najin Whitesword. Now, I mean, let's imagine that this game hasn't started yet. We all know Najin Whitesword has fallen off.
White Shield.
Yes. Right Shield. They're dreadful. They shouldn't even be in the playoffs, probably, if in a sane world. If Falcons hadn't lost their shit, they wouldn't be in there. They shouldn't even be there. And meanwhile, KTA... Monty's new bandwagon is rolling. It's up. It's just started. There's not that many people on it yet, so hop on board because you want to get in early. You want to get a good seat on the bandwagon.
There's still a lot of room on the KTRO's bandwagon.
Okay. But so
I am definitely sitting here just like whipping the horses at the front of the bandwagon right now. It's true.
So when we put these 2 teams together, well, it's easy. It's obviously going to be 3-0 KTROs, 3-1. They're going to wreck them. They're not going to be stupid enough to let Shield go to that ultra late game style. It's KTROs. They're just going to beat them early, get in there with the decisive moves. There's no way it's going to blind pick and almost lose the whole fucking series, right, Monty? Just please tell me.
I think actually, well, there are a couple of factors. Arrow's still definitely a sloppy team. They haven't covered all their bases yet. They sometimes lack a game plan going in. And the second part of that was Shield stepped it up. They had a really good strategy against, they let the KT Arrows have their picks and then had a beautiful pick and ban phase where they countered it really hard in game 1. But the Arrows brought it back. Kakao had a couple shaky games, but by the end, he was just absolutely dominating Watch. I mean, he crushed Watch's Nocturne and then played Nocturne and then baited Watch into his own jungle and then killed him there. So Kakao really did well. They definitely picked it up. So,
what did you think of Shield though? Because this actually looked like you could have erased the whole group stage. This looked like the Shield of last playoffs. Go to blind pick with everyone. Get to blind pick where you can pick your best champions. Although they actually did something a little different here. But anyway, the principle, and then they would win by having Save and Goon go crazy on the best champions that they could just pick because there was no draft period. Okay. This looked like classic era Shield, right?
Yeah, the thing is that Rookie is a lot better than Ryu or Ambition. Rookie is a very impressive mid laner, up and coming mid laner, and I don't think Goon was able to manhandle him as efficiently as he was some kind of more mid tier Korean mids.
So in terms of the KT Arrows players, then, okay. There was a lot of hype around Rookie. He had a couple of games here where he was really good, obviously. Goong's very good as well. We've never said Goong's bad. Like, he can match up to some degree. Where does Rookie actually... Like, I think Monty... We haven't discussed this, but I think Monty actually thinks Rookie's like top 3 in Korea mid. He's after Dade and Faker, right? I mean, just because he doesn't have the pedigree and he hasn't done it yet in the playoffs, I think that just on his skills, that's where you'd put him if we could transport 2 months in advance, Or in arrears, rather.
Yep, I don't know. Pawn's good, too. That's why I paused, because Pawn is definitely way up there, too. So.
But he's better than Ambition. He's better than Goon.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, interesting. And the other player that Monty always gives all this I wouldn't say hype because some of it's justified. It's not like you're just creating it out of nothing. But he always puts a lot of emphasis on Arrow. The person with the stupidest name to play on KT Arrows. But
Arrow didn't have the best series either against. He had some good games, but he was still a little shaky. I don't think his Kog'Maw is up to the standard of a lot of the other Kog'Maw players in Korea.
Okay, so that's a question
But his Twitch is really good, though. His Twitch is still good.
Wasn't that a little bit worrying in that sense in terms of if you're looking to Arrow to become an elite AD carry who's going to be... Because in theory, him and Rookie are going to have to be the carries who take this team to the top, okay? If Arrow's going to become that guy who can be like the second star who really will put them at the level of the whites and the blues of this world... Isn't it worrying to see him perform like that against Zephyr? Who actually, I think Zephyr is the guy who has to be on the chopping block if you imagine Shield, you know. He's the worst player on their team.
Yeah, really? I don't know. I think Watch maybe, but...
I think they're in a contest there between each other.
I think Zephyr is actually a lot more consistent than Watch. I think Watch has a higher upside when he's good, but Watch isn't good very often. And Zephyr is pretty consistently mediocre.
Do you think, what is it about, it seems to me like you can actually define how KT Arrows does just by how Kakao does. If Kakao is going and he's got that game where he's got the right champion and he's doing well, he's getting aggressive and he's getting nice picks and creating fights that they're just going well, that's when KT Arrows do win and they're very exciting. When he can't get going, I think they lose every game. Why do you think that is? Is it even that case? Have I gone too extreme?
I think you have gone too extreme. I think that the Arrows really, whoever's doing the shot calling in that team, they throw based on over aggressive situations. They lose leads because they extend too far. They chase kills as a team, and it's not necessarily Kakao's individual performance that makes them sink or swim. Certainly, it helps. And I mean, Kakao is just such a good jungler that. I am curious if you put a more average jungler in that team, what exactly would happen if they...
So if we just put Watch in, basically?
Oh, yeah, sure. Because the thing about it is that Kakao can win games just from the jungle, like by himself. And he did that really 2 games against Naj and White Shield, where, like I said, it was the whole Nocturne Elise matchup switcheroo where Kakao won both. He beat Watch both ways, both with Nocturne against Elise and with Elise against Nocturne through just basically superior knowledge and positioning on the map.
Going forwards from here, has this series shaken your faith in KTA a bit?
Yeah, well... Has it shaken my faith in order for them to make the finals? No. Do I think that they're going to be crushed in the finals by whichever team ends up there from the other side of the bracket? Yes. I mean, going to segue this into the other series, Sword versus S, Najin Black Sword versus SKTS was probably the single worst playoff series that I have seen in Champions. And I've seen them all. So I'll just go ahead and say in Champions history. The level of play was atrocious. The team's ability to close out games was awful. S really doesn't seem like they've developed at all. They still just turtle and hope they can win. Sword has no idea how to play when ahead. Yeah, just really not good. And I think that the Shield versus Arrows, while it wasn't the highest quality match ever, it was still a good series overall. And we still saw some good things, whereas it was hard really to find much to like at all about S versus Sword. And I think it would surprise me very much if S was able to take out the Arrows in the semi.
I actually thought, what's funny is, both sides of it were kind of worked for me. Like KT Arrows, I thought, okay, this has deflated them a bit for me, seeing them potentially almost lose the series. But actually, it gave me a bit more respect for Shield. It's like, okay, they actually are in the Blaze position now where they have that style and it does work. It just doesn't work consistently enough that you win 3 out of 5 games. You win 2. That's how it works. and that's not the position you want to be in. But even so, in a bracket where you seeded it perfectly by who's the best, they would have been where they are now. They would have been battling to potentially be the 4th best team in the semis. They could be the 4th best team in Korea, depending on how you stack up KTA and them, right?
Right.
Where does Shield go from here, though? Do you think not making Worlds would be the key and they'll actually change Shield itself? Because, okay, other teams, you can make a case for them changing, but hasn't Shield got a good lineup now?
Well, I think this was the season where you make the change. Because if we look at the last few seasons, they make semis, then they make finals. Like, everything was on an upswing for them, right? They had 2 seasons that you saw that improvement. The improvement was obvious not only in their placement, but also just in watching their games. And think that it was a tough final to call, and I wouldn't call Shield an overwhelming favorite in the Champions Spring final, but I would call them a slight favorite over Samsung Blue. Obviously, we see that wasn't the case, but certainly they were my favorite going in. And yeah, I think maybe you do have to make a roster change right now, and I think that probably the people up are Watch and Zephyr.
When you did predict them to win the OGN final, and so potentially they would now have, and listen, it could have happened. They could have been enshrined as like one of the champions, and we'd have seen this drop off now. When the same thing happened to Blaze, Blaze was on the brink of winning against MVP, and they were gonna beat MVP, and then they'd have gotten their chance. They'd have gotten back to the top. Then the next season, the same thing probably would have happened. They'd have still dropped off the same way, regardless of that one match. But we saw that their style was exposed. Has that actually happened to Shield, do you think? Is that the reason why, or is it specific players being overrated, like Save and Goon having limited champions pools and so on?
No. I think that Save has, his Gragas is probably the best top lane Gragas play that we've seen in that series. He played out of his mind on Gragas, and it was very impressive to see his teleport timings, his Gragas combos with Lichbane first. It was really, really cool. And Shield definitely came out swinging, and to Shield's credit, in the first game, they played a lot more up-tempo, let's hit bot with this top lane Gragas hard and early with teleport in order to get a big advantage for our bot lane. And so I don't think it's a stylistic issue. I think that the primary problem of Shield is that Watch is not as smart as some of the other top-tier junglers. He got mind-gamed extremely hard by Kakao and couldn't read the situation, and was just inferior in kind of both ways of that matchup that I was talking about. And that's really problematic for them.
The funny thing is, the hype around Save was so high heading into that final. And because in particular, he was the star who got exposed and got shown up and looked really bad in his matchup as well, it meant that everyone quickly not only hopped off his bandwagon, but pretended they were never on it. They were like, I didn't even think he was that good. He's not in top 3 in Korea and all this. I actually think, as we see more games come by and Shield's gradually picking it up again, I actually think Save's been hard done by that. I think he's very good. He's definitely elite level to me. And in fact, I'd go as far as to say, here's a prediction for you. 6 months from now, people will consider Save to be a much better top laner than Acorn from Samsung Blue. 6 months from now.
Yeah, I agree with that statement.
I think Save's here to stay. He's going to be like a top 3, top 4 top laner just going from here on out. Okay, maybe he was Shyvana only at one point in time. It seems like to me like he's picking up, but his rise is picking it up. Like you said, he's got Gragas now. I wasn't that convinced in his Lulu, but okay, he's getting there. He's getting a champion pool that's pretty solid now. You can't just ban out one thing and beat him, right?
Yes, I absolutely agree, and he's shown a lot of proficiency on some of these champions as well. So
we don't really have that much to say about Black Sword versus S because it was fucking appalling.
Duke also had a very impressive Gragas in that series too.
There is surely no way SKTS can win this semi-final. Barring some fucking miracle that we can't foresee now. There's no way they can win it, right?
KT Arrows, I think, would have to be... who knows? Like, the thing is, the KT Arrows are ridiculously inconsistent. When they're bad, they are atrocious. But I think it would be a massive upset for S to beat the Arrows.
Let me put it to you this way. This is the most imbalanced semi-final in the history of OGN. Can you think of one that was worse?
Yeah, I think that Winter, coming into the Winter Finals this year, where SK Telecom was on that big streak, and you have to remember that arguably the 4 top teams in Korea were all on the same side of the bracket.
No, I just mean the semi-final, though.
Oh, the semi-final.
Because that KTB was a final semi-final. That's parities there. Just one semi-final. There's no semi-final that's been more lopsided into who should win than this. S should have no way of winning.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It just shouldn't happen. So as a result, we can't predict it will happen because we have no reason. There's nothing to base it off that it would happen. S
would have to have like their best games ever, and the KT Arrows would have to be the KT Arrows at their worst, I think.
So when Shield made the winter semi-final, it was very easy to say, okay, kind of a fluke. They only had to beat Zenix Storm, and because of the fucked up bracket, they just got an automatic semi. When you look at S now, but in that scenario, actually, you gave credit to Shield. You thought they were good, and Nofei was good, and they'd fixed a lot of things. Does S making the semi at all change your kind of very harsh view on S and what they're not good at and the one thing they do that's good?
No, the thing about S, we talk about a lot about Blaze and having a one or shield and having this one play style and pushing into the late game. S is the same way, except S doesn't even have the same individual talent that Blaze and Shield have. So they literally, they're like, well, Blaze and Shield can make finals and semis, and I suppose S has made the semis now, but it wasn't pretty. Well, they have in the past consistently made finals and semis based on their playstyles, but they haven't been able to quite push it into that tournament win. I think S is a team that has barely been able to push it into the playoffs with that same style, and this is their first season in the playoffs, and I think that quarterfinal was really bad between Sword and S. Okay,
so here's a crazy scenario for you, Monty. The third match, the one that's coming up, Samsung White versus SKT. Obviously, this is the match everyone wants to see in the round of 8. Well, what's funny is the context of history is so funny the way it changes. The old best rivalry in Korean LoL was KTB versus SKT, because they were the one team who could go toe-to-toe with SKT, and they didn't beat them, obviously, but they could give them a real challenge, even when SKT was unbeatable. But actually, now, because of White's performance last season, and Dade going off and being good off in blue, it actually feels like the old Ozone versus SKT has now re-emerged as this is the best rivalry in Korean LoL, right?
Well, I've said this a lot of times. White/Ozone is the only team in the world with a winning record against SKTK historically. Over time, White has been favored. And if we think about it, there haven't been that many roster changes between these two teams. Of course, we had Casper temporarily on SKTK, and then we had Om for Looper and Pawn for Dade on White, but they've remained majority the same teams, right? And in fact, for SKTK's case, now entirely the same team once again. So this is a very interesting rivalry, and I think that it continues to go in White's favor. And I think that this is going to be a very close quarterfinal, but I do think that White is the favorite, and I do think White is also the favorite to make it into the playoffs for a lot of the reasons why we were talking with Tabzz earlier. I think Blue is not going to be as strong when they have to rely on 1v1 and 2v2 lanes, whereas that's more of White's specialty. And it will also, I think, play well for SKTK, but I do think that White is still a little bit ahead in terms of playing the early game well, and so that we will see probably a White versus Arrows final.
When you say that, if I had to translate that and say, guess what that sounds to me like Monty's saying, I think White will win 3-1.
I'd say 3-2 actually.
Because I actually think this is going to go 5 games. I think
it's
going
so
to be
too.
that good,
Oh yeah, I think it's going to be a great series.
Here's what I think is an interesting factor, though. First of all, when we were describing the rivalry, well, you would think it would take away from the rivalry that, okay, they lost Dade, because Dade versus Faker was a big thing before, and obviously is a big thing now as he's off in blue. But the genius of it is, the one player they could bring in instead of Dade, they brought in the only other guy who had a legitimate rivalry with Faker, which is Pawn, who the guy who beat him in blue. So actually, it still makes the rivalry even better in some ways. When we go into this series now, like, is there any basis to think SKT wins? Like, how do they win? We've seen them struggle against these Samsung teams for the last two months, month and a half, every time, no matter how well they play.
I think SKTK still has an extremely strong mid game, but they fall behind. They have a tendency to fall behind early. And I think Imp and Mata are better at duo laning than Piglet and Mandu are. And I think that White is superior in terms of the lane swap as well. So I think it's going to be, SKTK is always going to be fighting from behind at like pre-15 minutes. And so it's just, they need to work on that early game. If they don't fall behind from too much in the mid game, I think that they can outplay their opponents. And we saw that with Blue as well. Blue got a very large advantage in the group stage against K, and SKTK fought back really, really well, but ultimately Blue was able to hang on to enough of an edge to overcome them in the end. So for me, it's all about taking a look at SKTK's early game.
What was funny about the context of the spring season is when they lost to White in the round of 8 there, what you hoped for if you're an SKT fan is that White just goes and blitzes everyone and wins the whole league, and then you could at least mindfuck yourself and say, well, maybe we were actually the second best team. We haven't really fallen off. We just got one team beat us. Okay. And then I noticed when the Masters final came around and SKT was the one, unfortunately, getting bullied around by Blue and White, that's when people really started saying, okay, this is the end of the empire of SKT. This is where we've seen that SKT isn't going to be the best team again. I actually think this match is the one that decides that. If they lose to White here, I think now you can call it. Like, now SKT is done being the best team in Korea. Am I going too far?
I think you are going too far, because I think that all three of these teams recently have been so close in terms of skill level that differentiating them 1 through 3 is pretty difficult. I think most people would say blue, white, K, and that's what I would say, but I don't think it's very clear cut. And especially if we have a close 5-game series where it's not a resounding victory for white, then I think it's impossible really to put it out there. It also depends on how SKTK does in NLB, because of course one of these teams is going down to NLB.
I actually think the factor, though, that makes me say that, Monty, like it's quite a bold prediction that they won't ever reach the top again, is because when I watched those other games, that was the thing that was worrying me. It wasn't SKT's level, because listen, they played okay against White, not great. A lot of that was just Pawn had a great series. Faker did what he could, and in general, some of their players hadn't come back to being decent on SKT. They were still in their slump. But it was the Masters final that really crushed me. It was the Masters final, and then the series they had against Blue in this OGN season. Because in those games, SKT was playing fucking awesome. They were playing really good League of Legends, but they ran into a team where it's like they could not figure out what you do to beat these teams. It's like there's something that those teams had that they couldn't get past. And so the reason why I think this is the crucial series is because if, with as much time they've had to prepare for this one, they can't figure out through coaching or strategy how to beat White, I don't see them beating a White and Blue going forwards. Can you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be extra hard to beat both of those teams, because the Samsung coaches, if one of their teams loses, they're going to be able to make instant adaptations with their other squad. So SKTK making the finals that would be quite a feat in my mind.
Especially because the key thing is the T teams play the same way. It's not like Frost and Blaze where they play totally different and the stars are at different positions.
They're slightly different, but yes, they're very.
They're similar enough though that you could apply some things you learn, right?
Yeah, they do have their own. They do have their own flavor, but they're definitely not like Blaze and Frost, like discrepancy.
Okay, I have a weird question for you here, because no one's thought of it this way. I actually get a weird sense that if White, Blue, and SKT go to Worlds, when playing purely against non-Korean teams, I actually think SKT's style might be the most effective versus the non-Koreans. Meanwhile, I think White and Blue are the best versus the Koreans, but they're the ones where they have more of a question mark to me internationally. Is that too wacky?
I think it's too wacky, especially if the lane swaps continue, because Blue is definitely like the best in terms of just like mind gaming you and getting a lead out of a lane swap situation. So, I mean, they're the ones that everybody was looking to learn from in that stage, and they're still the best at it, I think.
The last matchup is Blue versus Stealths. And listen, Thorin wants to say, okay, after KTA versus SKTS, this is another obvious stomp, Stealths can't win, but Monty has a second, smaller bandwagon that is hitched to the back of the KTA bandwagon, which is being driven by Captain Jack, and it is the Jin Air Stealths. Why, Monty? Why?
I do think that Blue are overwhelming favorites here, but I think that the Stealths will be able to take a game. I think 3-1 to Blue. And I think that Trace is a really good top laner. And so I think there's a chance that in a standard lane situation that Trace may be able to get a big advantage. And Captain Jack has been performing very well recently.
Like, what percentage chance does Stealths have a win in this series?
15.
Okay, that's pretty underwhelming if you think they're going to win. They've got almost no chance.
Yeah, very small chance.
Okay. I mean, by the way, as a nice setup, if they won this match, then fuck it. Why not we win the semi as well? If you can beat Blue, you can beat whoever's in the semi, right?
Yep. And if the Stealths, I think that, well, more than likely what we're going to see at Worlds is White, Blue, and K. It does seem at this juncture, considering we have like a month left to go before everything wraps up, that those are going to be the teams we see. But there's always that, I think if you had to, start putting bets on underdogs to like sweep through, and I mean, both the Stealths and the Arrows have to make the finals in order to even have a shot during the Korean qualifier for that 3rd seed. But if you had to choose an underdog team to like power up at exactly the right time and go on a tear, it's going to be one of those two teams. Still very unlikely, but if you were like, Monty, who's the underdog that could make worlds? I'd say like arrows or stealths.
I'd say Blaze. No, I actually wouldn't at this point. Even I've hopped off my own bandwagon at this point. What I did was I actually
Flame is dead to you.
No, I handcuffed Flame and I've taken him off. I've parachuted out of it, and then we're leaving Ambition to crash that train, and me and Flame are going somewhere else. I'm gonna like, listen, Flame. We have an understanding. You know, I know you don't know me. It's actually scaring you that I'm so close to you, just talking to you about your career in English, which you don't understand. But come with me. We're gonna find you a good team. Like, fuck those CJ coaches. You just come with me. Like, I'll trust me. Trust me. Fall back. Do a trust exercise. I'll get you the team you need, Flame. Have you ever thought about playing in a team called Najin Shield? No. Anyway, actually, people sometimes have said that. You know, people have said, like, why does that Flame shift teams? Will he shift teams? My sense of it is he's in a mad life position where he has no choice. He can never leave Blaze, right? Blaze would never let Flame go. Because even if you're bad, at least you have the fan favorite, you know, right?
Maybe. I don't know. Like, he has a contract. He could go somewhere else.
If you could hypothesize, or you could even directly tamper without Riot being able to find you, which team would be the best team for us to put Flame onto now? And it can't just be like put him onto Samsung Blue. Like, we have to be like a team who aren't awesome, but we could put him on and he could be better and they could be better. Who would be a good pick?
KT Arrows.
KT Arrows, yeah. Well, actually, that's a pretty obvious one because Someday, sure.
And Someday's a very average mid laner. He's not bad, but you know, he's pretty mediocre.
Yeah, it would be a good pick.
I think that would be an instant upgrade for the KT Arrows. I'm
not sure that Flame is the biggest fan of the KT organization. Just a feeling I've got going for me. Yeah. In any sense, now or before. Okay, that's about all we've got here. Is there anything else on Korea before we wrap it?
No, I think that's good. Okay,
I've got a question for you. Has things that have happened so far and the matchups we've got so far changed your view on who will win this season? Because last episode, I think it was, no, 2 episodes ago, we sort of agreed that, like, at the moment, there's no reason to think Blue wouldn't win.
No. I think White's going to win.
Okay, why have you changed your mind on that?
I just think that the meta is going in a way that the 1v1, the standard lane matchups being more prevalent, plays to White's strengths over Blue.
And so White will become the second team ever to win 2 OGNs?
That would be my prediction at the current stage, yes.
Okay. So if White wins OGN, they're also the favorite to win Worlds?
Depending on how the patches shake out before Worlds, probably.
Is there a patch that could happen, hypothetically, I think of a past patch or something that could change now, that would make SKT, as they are now, the best team in Korea? What would it need to happen? Is there anything?
A big change could be the changes to Exhaust if Faker can start playing Assassins again. That could be extremely dangerous. That would make SKTK pretty scary. It would also make Dade pretty scary as well, and make Pawn a lot less scary.
Just to add some hype out there, the last few days I've been subtitling my Flame video interview, so that should come out like 1 or 2 days. And it's really, like, this has got some awesome shit in it. So people, a lot of the topics we've discussed now about Shield, about Blaze, about Flame, about a lot of these things are actually addressed directly in this interview. Even about actually the Loco Doka thing of Helios and Lustboy shit-talking him. It's all in this interview. He goes in a ridiculous depth. When this finishes, everyone watching will have almost as big a man crush on Flame as I do. So there's some hype for you right there. So stay tuned. Oh yeah, one thing. As we close, people always ask, okay, when's the VOD coming out? Where's it going to be? And people always seem confused as to where to get it, because obviously there's no Reddit nowadays. And so to get it, you can't find out in advance. So what we're going to do now at On Games is, first of all, we'll release all the shit on YouTube anyway. So subscribe to the YouTube and you'll get it immediately in your feed. Secondly, since we now make a post every week where we announce like the episode and who's going to be on it, each week I'm just going to edit that post and put the VOD in it. So just bookmark that post and go refresh it and go to it, and the VOD will be there when it comes up. So there we go. It's easy. That's all you need. Easy. One day I'll even figure out XSplit, but just don't crowd me on that one, okay? I'm figuring shit out. Don't give me unrealistic Gleeb type expectations. I've got to live my own life and be my own man. That's the end of the show, 17
3-hour episodes. Yeah. Over 50, 45, 50 hours of XSplit. It's going to take some more time.
That's it, though. That's the end.